through, for example, his YouTube platform, his Twitter, where he has more than, well, I should say X, more than 100 million followers. That's a direct connection, which works for him.
I'm glad you mentioned that figure because I'm going to drive a hole through that. The total number of, I looked it up, users of X, formerly Twitter, is about 25 million in India. Now, where does the rest come from? All abroad? There are 75 million. I saw the figure, 101 million or something followers. A lot of it is bots. A lot of it is artificial. Very few people have noted the incongruity of this. The numbers speak for themselves in this case. So his reach is far less than what they claim. That's part of the propaganda. You can say it's a brilliant achievement by the media machine. But then there is evidence that, particularly in the Hindi-speaking states, this barrage of information proved to be counterproductive. And the whole thing, in short, boomeranged in those areas because the propaganda got so far too much for people to swallow.
You say it boomeranged, and of course he didn't quite get the election result he wanted, but he's still in power.
Yes.
Here's the words of an interesting young thinker on India, Ravi Agrawal, who's actually now editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy magazine. He says, there is a new idea of India prevailing, Modi's idea of India, which believes that a powerful chief executive is preferable to a liberal one, even if it means the curtailment of individual rights and liberties. In other words, he's saying that, you know, Indians sort of appreciate collective prosperity and put a priority on that more than your liberal philosophy of individual rights.
I wouldn't consider myself a liberal in any classical sense. I'm certainly to the left of that. Yes, we have to make a choice.
Well, maybe you're out of tune with modern India.
No, I think modern India has fought back, or some of modern India has fought back, and the young are fighting back. In fact, I'm rather hopeful. We did this in 2021 when it was very, very dark, the picture for the media and for civil liberties in India, freedoms. But now I think a lot more voices are out there.
And Ram, we have to end there. Thank you very much for joining me on Hard Talk.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning. I'm Margot Watt in for Marcy Marcusa. We're just ahead of World Report and, of course, Information Radio. But first, let's get the very latest from our Winnipeg newsroom with Heather Wells. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's top doctor is urging you to get your flu shot amid a late spike in cases. Influenza cases are trending upwards past their normal peak this winter. Chief Provincial Public Health Officer Dr. Brent Rusin says the uptick is putting a strain on the healthcare system. So we'll hear more about that. Also, Winnipeg South MP Ben Carr is part of yet another delegation to Washington, D.C. Carr says talking to U.S. officials is important no matter what Donald Trump does. And yesterday, Donald Trump reiterating plans to impose tariffs on Canadian goods. I'll be back with Manitoba News at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
A very mild morning again in Winnipeg, -1 degree currently. We're in for a mix of sun and cloud today with a high of +4, and temperatures staying nice and stable for the next couple of days at least. For tomorrow, partly sunny and a high of +3. Good morning to our studio crew this morning. Abby Adiyemi is our technical producer. He'll be covering the weather much better than what I just did. He'll be with us all morning. Our YouTube producer is Kevin Nipatebo, and Corey Funk is our show director and covering the commute for us. With your help, of course, we always welcome your calls to let us know what's happening. Today on the show, we have round 2. Coming up, we'll talk with our political reporter about last night's federal Liberal leadership debate in French and what to expect from the English one tonight. That's all ahead on Information Radio. Also on the show, we're going to take a look at a Manitoba brewery in Gimli that is really embracing winter. They've actually built a curling rink on top of the roof. So what does that look like? How heavy is that ice? We'll find out all about that just after 6 o'clock. And later on the show, we'll talk about healthcare in our country. We have a special series that's looking at Canada's family doctor shortage. We're talking with patients and doctors from across the country to take a look at what the main issues are today and what solutions there might be going forward. World Report is up next.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Canadian actor Enrico Colantoni dreamed of moving to the U.S. and making a name in Hollywood. It wasn't an easy road, but eventually he was able to do just that. He'll tell you about his path from his early struggles in New York to his role on the new show, Allegiance.
This job has one rule: you follow orders.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdelmahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. The first major French test is over for the Liberal leadership hopefuls and their scores. Let's just say some of the candidates are probably glad they're being graded on a curve. All 4 of the remaining contenders square off again tonight, this time in English. But first, let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, were there any fireworks last night?
Marcia, no. There were some nuances in a few policy areas, but if the point of this debate was to set up a united front against Donald Trump in the first round on Canada-U.S. relations and then against Pierre Poilievre in the subsequent rounds on the economy and climate action, well, mission accomplished, because the candidates spent more time criticizing those two as their real opponents than each other. In the post-debate scrums, Chrystia Freeland was spinning this as a positive.
This is a race inside the family, inside our party. And it's a really good thing that we are agreed about very many things.
Tonight's English debate will feature the same themes as the first French debate. We will see if there are the same friendly tones or whether things get more aggressive the second time out discussing their differences. Because without big policy disagreements to explore last night, minds focused instead on how well each candidate was communicating in French. And Carney in particular seemed to be shifting a bit uncomfortably as he thought on his feet.
Tell us more about that, Janice.
Before the debate was even over, Conservatives pounced on one moment in particular, when Carney intended to say he agreed with the point Frank Baylis had made about Hamas, but it came out as Carney saying, "We agree with Hamas." Freeland, standing beside him, had to jump in and clarify what he meant so the error didn't stand. Here's how Carney and Baylis summed it up for reporters.
I said that we all were in agreement against Hamas, or at least the intention.
We all get tripped up in different second language or third languages and that. I'm absolutely certain Mr. Carney did not mean to say he supported Hamas in any way and that he's completely against Hamas.
At several points in the debate, rather than leave him to suffer for his miscommunication, Chrystia Freeland intervened to help Carney get his message out. Now, that's very helpful behavior for a loyal lieutenant, but it's going to be interesting to see what Liberal supporters make of these two rivals looking so chummy. Their debate ended with a hug, not a handshake.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. French President Emmanuel Macron is preparing to meet with members of the European Council tomorrow. He wants to debrief them on his visit to the White House. Yesterday, Macron met with U.S. President Donald Trump to discuss the war in Ukraine. Trump says he can secure a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine and says Russian President Vladimir Putin is on board. But Macron warns that any deal with Moscow must come with guarantees. The CBC's Crystal Gomansing reports.
We want peace. And I think the initiative of President Trump is a very positive one.
Phrase for the president on Fox News Channel's special report with Brett Bayer, a direct pipeline for French President Emmanuel Macron to a majority of U.S. President Donald Trump's supporters.
We worked very hard together with the UK Prime Minister to have a French-UK proposal to say we are ready to send troops, not to go to the front line, but to be, in some locations, being defined by the treaty, as a presence to maintain this peace and our collective credibility with the U.S. backup and a U.S. backstop.
The interview followed friendly meetings with the president.
President Macron was very special man in my book.
The most powerful nation in the world has adopted a more neutral stance in relation to the war in Ukraine, no longer saying Russia is the aggressor. Macron used the face-to-face time to tell Trump Russia can't be trusted and said that any peace must not mean the surrender of Ukraine. He also corrected the record on how Europe supports Ukraine with weapons and financing. Eleanor Carreau is the vice president for the French Foreign Affairs Committee.
For Donald Trump, this is the opportunity to make a good deal. For Emmanuel Macron, who's speaking on behalf of France, but also to a certain extent on behalf of Europeans, this is an existential conflict.
Different motivations, but both want the war to end. That mutual starting point will be picked up by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who's next in line to visit the president. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
The International Criminal Court has sent its prosecutor to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Armed rebels continue to capture territory in the country's eastern region. Today, ICC prosecutor Karim Khan issued this warning.
Hundreds of people are reportedly dead, thousands injured. And the message has to be conveyed very clearly. Any armed group, any armed forces, any allies of armed groups or armed forces don't have a blank check. They must comply with international humanitarian law.
Congo's prime minister says more than 7,000 people have died since M23 rebels took over the provincial capital of Goma last month. The region has been at the center of brutal battles for decades. Armed groups are fighting for control of the mineral-rich territory. There is some positive news from the Vatican this morning. Pope Francis is showing some improvement after another night in hospital. A steady stream of people have been flowing through St. Peter's Square to offer their support for the 88-year-old.
I think it's a severe situation, so we have to pray for him. It will be very difficult for him, I think.
I'm worried for the person, but not from a religious point of view. He's still an important person for many people.
The Pope has been in hospital for 11 days now. He has bronchitis and pneumonia and has shown signs of kidney failure, but the Vatican says that is now under control. The threat of U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs is already affecting Canada's construction industry. It's driving up the costs of bigger residential projects, and experts warn it could make the housing crisis even worse. Lauren Bird reports.
Steel I-beams make up the structure of almost every high-rise. Canada doesn't manufacture a lot of them. Most are imported. Keenan Loomis is the president and CEO of the Canadian Institute of Steel Construction.
But it will be subject to retaliatory tariffs if the government of Canada decides that that's a product that they are going to impact with tariffs.
Steel is on a long list of items the Canadian government says it will tariff in response to Donald Trump's tariff threats. Much of that list are things required for building homes and high-rises. Flooring, shingles, windows, lumber. When those costs go up for builders, eventually it goes up for the buyer. Scott Anderson is the head of the Ontario Home Builders Association.
Anything that is in high demand going into home construction, cement, rebar, things like that, if there are tariffs that are hitting those, it's just going to continue to drive the costs up.
But some builders may decide the added cost is too much to make a project viable. Michael Brooks is the head of the Real Property Association of Canada, which represents the real estate investment and development sector.
I've already heard about projects for new housing, new apartments being shelved just because of the uncertainty.
And for a country already in a housing crisis, experts say anything that makes housing more expensive or harder to build will likely lead to supply issues down the road. Lauren Bird, CBC News, Toronto.
Canadian pride has been on the rise ever since Donald Trump mused about his desire for the country to be the 51st state. So it's no surprise some Canadians raised alarms over Google Maps labeling. Google has followed Trump's lead. For U.S. users, the Gulf of Mexico is now the Gulf of America. And as Liam Britton tells us, some parks in this country have been changed too.
So I thought, well, how can this possibly be true?
That's what Kiki Grabowski thought when she read a post on social media saying that Google Maps had started labeling provincial parks, like Elk Falls near her Campbell River, BC home, as state parks.
Well, that's our sovereignty. That's our country. Those parks belong to Canada. They are not state parks.
On Google's help forum and social media, thousands of users noted the errors affecting parks across the country. But Google told CBC, quote, "The vast majority of these parks have had their existing labels for several years. We're actively working to update labels for parks in Canada to avoid confusion." The concerns come at a time of tension between Canada and the U.S., but University of Victoria professor Ruben Rose Redwood also points out the maps are absolutely using the wrong terms.
I do think that Canadians are right to criticize these maps and to say, hey, these are not state parks, these are provincial parks, and they should be labeled as such.
As Monday turned to Tuesday, a number of formerly incorrect state parks had been reclassified as provincial parks or just plain old parks. Perhaps a sign of Google charting a new course. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. I'm Marco Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Coming up on the show this hour, he has spent some 2 decades as a snowbird in Florida, but now he's calling it quits. We'll hear from this Manitoban about why he recently sold his property there. We'll also go to Ottawa and check in with our political reporter for a recap of last night's French language Liberal leadership debate. We'll also look forward to tonight's English debate. And up first here on the show, how a Manitoba brewery is embracing winter by building a curling rink on its roof. That's all to come on Information Radio. But first, let's get the very latest from our CBC Winnipeg newsroom. Here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba is warning of a late uptick in flu cases, putting a strain on the healthcare system. Cases of influenza A are trending upward in the province. This comes as Canada deals with what may be the highest number of flu cases seen since the pandemic. U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threats have some Manitoba breweries feeling a little uncertain. Kevin Selch at Little Brown Jug Brewing in the Exchange says aluminum cans he uses come from the U.S. I do apologize. I'm so sorry about this. I'm one of those persons who did not get a flu shot, and there you go.
No apologies
but I will tell you,
Heather.
We'll hear more from Little Brown Jug and the uncertainty that tariff threats are causing. That's coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, Heather, thanks very much and take care. Let's get a first look at the forecast here with Abby this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Good. You?
Oh, well, just soaking into, the new, the period we are in now before the next system comes in, but I don't want to spoil.
Don't talk about the next system, not yet.
Let's not talk about that. Okay, anyway, we have a mix of sun and clouds across the province with light snow lingering in the northern part of the province this morning. We look at conditions in Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region. We're seeing Winnipeg sitting around -2 at this time. If you look up, it's clear. You can still spot some stars up there. Today, we will get sunny stats, and then a mix of sun and clouds will be moving in as we get into the morning. Some breeze would come from the south, and then we warm up to a high of +4. Though it will be like, the wind chill is still there, but not as we've been feeling for the past 2 or 3 weeks. And then some partly cloudy conditions will crawl in overnight. Tomorrow, we also have a mix of sun and clouds. In summary, southern Manitoba stats sunny before the clouds will move in. Westman, we're seeing some fog that will be clearing later, also impacting the Parkland region. And the northern part is staying cold with that snow they are falling from the Par all the way down to Churchill. But right now, Winnipeg, -2, heading to a high of +4.
It was such a great Manitoba experience last night going to the Jets game. And I can tell you, Abby, as we walked to the arena with thousands of other Winnipeggers and Manitobans, people were just out without jackets on. They just had jerseys. I saw some people in shorts. It's like, yeah, we're feeling spring. We're feeling happy. Let's go watch some hockey.
My tester of the weather is always Corey. I ask him what his run is whenever he runs to the studio.
Yeah, I actually went on my first shorts run this weekend.
And how was that?
It was great. It was Saturday. I went for a run in shorts. I definitely got some looks, but no regrets. Yeah. There we go. You have to. It's a Winnipeg thing.
Thank you, Abby. And Corey is going to watch traffic for us this morning.
Yes. Yeah. I can tell you it is officially pothole season out there today. Haven't got any calls about it yet, but that freeze thaw, as soon as that starts happening, those things start showing up and munching on your tires. So I am curious to hear what folks are seeing out there. If you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call. If you see any new potholes, let your fellow listeners know. I can tell you those sidewalks are a mixture of slippery and slushy right now. So also careful on those sidewalks. If you have any reports for me, let me know. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
If you go to Interlake Brewing Company in Gimli and ask to be seated at the patio, you might be surprised by what you see. Typically, the rooftop patio looks like any other patio in the province, but over the weekend, the owners decided to give it a makeover. Now, where chairs and tables once stood is a curling rink. Graham McLean is one of the owners. He also created the rink, and he's with us this morning. Good morning, Graham.
Morning.
Could you describe what the patio looks like right now?
Sure, yeah. So we adapted it to the winter to make it a little more fun and interesting for everybody. We've added a short curling rink that goes one direction and a bunch of different ice bars so people can come up and hang out and have a drink and enjoy the weather.
Very cool. When you talk about it being short, what is the size of it?
It's only about 30 feet long.
So how concerned were you about the weight of this thing on the roof?
We were pretty careful about that. When we renovated this building about a year and a half ago, we did a lot of development to help the structural side of things. So now that we're developing a rink on the roof, we're making sure to not lay on the ice too thick.
Right, literally.
Yeah.
when you first told people you were going to build a curling rink on top of the place, what was the reaction?
A lot of people were really excited about the idea. I think in general it's not extremely motivating to go outside and do outdoor sports in the middle of February like this. But, luckily we had some nice weather this past week, and this weekend we got some good use out of it.
So tell me what it was like over the weekend.
We had a bunch of different sorts of people pop in and throw a few jugs and give it a try. I think, depending on how much damage this nice weather does to it in this coming week, I think we'll keep it going and get more and more people interested.
How long did it take to create the rink?
Not too long. It took, I guess, a couple of weeks, a few days here and there, letting it freeze and building it up and all that stuff. And, the snow came pretty quick, so we were able to build all the ice bars and things fairly quickly.
So how much maintenance will there be to keep it in shape, especially with the weather changing so much here?
Yeah, that's kind of a, we'll see what happens sort of situation. I think, we're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, and that's when this warm weather has really struck us out here. So I'm going to go take a look at it tomorrow and see the damage and see what needs to be done. But, it all, like I said, depends on how much more snow is coming and all that. And, we'll do what we can to keep it going.
I have a good friend who was just out in Gimli ice fishing and just couldn't stop talking about how beautiful it was, what a great winter experience, which many of us have had the pleasure of enjoying over the years here. How does this tie into Gimli's place in the winter landscape?
So our place is right across the street from the lake. Great view of all the fishing shacks out there and snowmobile trails and all that stuff. So you're definitely, right in the main sort of harbor area there where there's a lot of activity on nice days. And, as you know, probably Gimli curling is a big deal in Gimli. So I think, we're trying to give people as many reasons as we can to get them outside and coming together as a community in the winter and get them to have some fun.
Well, let me know when the first rooftop tournament is happening, okay?
Sounds good.
Thanks, Graham. Graham McLean is the owner of Interlake Brewing Company in Gimli.
The United States has been ripped off.
The stories that matter.
Canada will be responding
as they happen.
We must put Canada first.
At home and around the world.
We don't need the products that they have.
And what they mean to you. For news you can trust.
We're coming to you live.
Stay with CBC News.
It is 6:18 minus 1 degree in Winnipeg. For Manitoban Laurie Fisher, the United States has been a big part of his life. Since the mid-60s, his parents have taken him to Clearwater, Florida, where his parents bought a home and became the first snowbirds in his family. Since 2005, Laurie bought into this idea, purchasing a condo of his own and spending his winters there with his wife. But now, with the political tension between Canada and the U.S., it's all about to change. CBC's Faith Fundal reached Laurie to learn more.
Why do you like going to the U.S. as a snowbird?
Well, it's really been a second home to me as long as I can remember it. I've been coming here with my parents first and then with my own family who love coming down here. I mean, we're big Disney fans. I'm a big fan of the weather. I'm not a big cold weather guy. And like I said, it's become a second home. And over the last little while, there's just a lot of tension and a lot of insecurity down here.
And so how do you feel about that tension and that insecurity?
Well, it's really changed in the last few years, and especially in the last few months. I mean, you just said it. I mean, next week, all sorts of things are happening, and we're hearing down here that a lot of Canadians are canceling coming down, even going to Disney. And so, for a number of reasons, we, after all these years, have made the decision and have, in fact, sold our condo. We'll be coming back home in mid-April, and I guess that'll be a new phase of my life without Florida in it on a regular basis.
What was that conversation like with you and your wife and your family about selling the condo and coming back home?
Very difficult. For me, it was very difficult. As I said, Florida's been a part of my life, well, going back to childhood. And I'm even looking ahead now. I know there's 7 weeks left, and I'm already feeling kind of the sadness, the insecurity, I guess, knowing that it's, I played in a golf day yesterday, for example, Canadian club down here, and I knew it was the last one. And you kind of get that sense that this will be the last time. You'll see a lot of these people. They're getting older. I'm getting older. And there is that sense of sadness. But I will tell you that there's been an incredible increase in divisiveness down here. I think, from Canada, we hear it all the time, the Republicans versus Democrats. And now, in my humble opinion, every word out of, I call him the orange fluff's mouth, is just creating more divisiveness. He has such a lack of respect for everyone other than himself that it really shines through. And I think it's really banding Canadians together. I was really happy on when we won the hockey game because it sure shut him up quickly. But the divisiveness down here is palatable. You can really see it. And the tensions have really increased. There's a lot of insecurity. And I think from a Canadian point of view, when you combine that kind of feeling with the very weak Canadian dollar, for us to just upkeep our condo in Canadian dollars was over $20,000 a year. And that's really using a second home that we're only at 5 or 6 months of the year.
So it essentially didn't make business sense after you did the cents and dollars and sort of the budgeting of it. It no longer made good business sense for you folks, in addition to all the other reasons too.
Yeah, and I think that was, the conversation my wife and I had, that was really the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back was, the cost and ever increasing because, we have HOA fees down here that are jumping up very quickly. I remember when years ago my parents were paying $150 a month, and they're now well in excess of $500 heading towards $600 a month.
That's a lot of money. Laurie, you were talking about the U.S. president and the rhetoric and the threats that we've been hearing about. Are you hearing that same framing of things from your American friends or the folks around you down there? Is that what you're hearing from the people who have known you for all these years? Are they saying the same thing?
Well, people are still, they're friends. They've been friends all my life. However, we are in a Republican area down here. And we've just made the decision with close friends, and our closest friends are Republicans, and we've just kind of said to them, look, we love you. We will always love you. The fact is, let's not talk politics.
Right.
Because I think you get two kind of stories now. You get the ones that are really regretting having voted for him, and the others that say, oh, he's doing a wonderful job. Oh, yes, it's America first. Finally, you do get that rhetoric. And so we kind of have to be quiet because we are guests down here, but I'm talking to a Canadian broadcaster now, so I can say what I'm really feeling.
Laurie, I have some friends who also live in the U.S., including in North Carolina. And one of the things they said to me was they made an intentional choice to remove Canadian flags on their cars, on their doorways, because of both the fear, real and perceived, of people bothering them on sort of the low end of it, and the higher end of it is being attacked. Are you hearing that kind of thing from other Canadians where you are?
No, we're really not. I mean, more and more Canadians, we were very lucky. We got a great real estate agent. We've sold very quickly, but more and more Canadians are selling. But we're not getting threats in any way. We're, in this community, I live in a community called On Top of the World, and it's really not anti-Canadian. I will tell you, it is anti-Mexican and anti-immigrant of any kind. But I guess we're not considered immigrants. We are, residents for this point. We're snowbirds.
Right.
So I think we haven't run into that at all. In fact, I very proudly put a Canadian flag on our front door when we won the Four Nations Cup, and there was no problem with that at all. And
I hope you got some folks are giving you thumbs up. I would hope.
They did, definitely. And in fact, I was saying before, I bought a new cap. And, I feel very strongly, and Canada's come together. This whole 51st state thing is just complete, utter nonsense. And I have a black cap that I just bought that has a Canadian flag on it, and it says, Canada is not for sale. And my American friends laugh at it. And, most of the people that are close to us know that it is just the president's rhetoric. And I said very bluntly the other day, I sing the national anthems down here to a group, and basically I said, look, I was so upset when I heard Canadians were booing the American national anthem, and vice versa when Americans were booing the Canadian. I said, let's remember that politicians come and go, and our friendship will always remain. Doesn't matter who's in power, but there's no doubt that there is some insecurity down here for snowbirds. I think generally speaking, not just the Canadian dollars, just people not knowing what's going to happen for the next 4 years worries a lot of people.
That was Canadian snowbird Laurie Fisher speaking with Up to Speed host Faith Fundal.
Beneath its snowy mantle, cold and clean, the unborn grass lies waiting for its coat to turn to green. The snowbird sings a song he always sings, and speaks to me of flowers that will bloom again in spring. When I was young, my heart was young then too, and anything that it would tell me, that's the thing that I would do. But now I feel such emptiness within, for the thing that I want most in life's the thing that I can't win. Spread your tiny wings and fly away, and take the snow back with you where it came from on that day. What I love forever is untrue, and if I could, that I would fly away with you. The breeze along the river seems to say that he'll only break my heart again should I decide to stay. So little snowbird, take me with you when you go to that land of gentle breezes where the peaceful waters flow. Spread your tiny wings and fly away, and take the I would fly away with you. Yeah, if I could, you know that I would fly away with you.
That is the classic Snowbird, of course, by Anne Murray. Just ahead of news time here at CBC, coming up after the news, President Donald Trump says he is going forward with those tariffs on most imports from Canada next week. How are Canadian officials responding to that? We'll take a look at that on our business report. We're looking at a pretty mild day here in Winnipeg again, a mix of sun and cloud. Up to about 4 degrees. We're at -1 degree right now. We'll take a look at the extended forecast and at the regional forecast for all of Manitoba with Abby, and that's coming up after the news as well. We'll also talk more about tariffs and Trump. Those were the two big talking points at the leadership debate for the Liberals last night. We'll take a look at the winners and losers from that after CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's mainly clear and -2 at the Forks. Sunny today and a high of 4. Manitoba is warning a late uptick in flu cases is putting a strain on the healthcare system. Cases of the influenza A strain are trending upwards in the province. That comes as Canada deals with what may be the highest number of flu cases since the pandemic. Dr. Craig Jenny is an infectious disease expert at the University of Calgary.
This is also, in many parts of Canada, coupled to a near record low vaccine rate. Vaccine rates continue to drop, and because of that, we do see a lot more flu cases, and we see a lot of people, unfortunately, needing medical care in the hospitals.
Manitoba's flu coverage rate fell 2% from last year to 23%. The province's top doctor is encouraging people who haven't gotten the shot yet to do so. U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to impose a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum has some local breweries watching closely.
We're doing about 80 cans a minute.
At Little Brown Jug Brewing in Winnipeg's Exchange, the beer is made here, but the aluminum cans come from the U.S. LBJ founder Kevin Selch says the threat of tariffs is creating uncertainty when it comes to expanding costs and pricing.
The impact of a 25% tariff for us is probably about 5 or 6 cents on per can of the tallboy can, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in manufacturing, margins are really, really tight, and so we're always fighting to make the price 5 cents cheaper or to save 5 cents.
U.S. President Donald Trump says tariffs on Canadian goods are going ahead. Trump yesterday reiterated 25% tariffs will go into effect on March 4th. Meanwhile, Canada is trying to use diplomacy to stave them off. Winnipeg South MP Ben Carr is part of another delegation in Washington, D.C. Carr says talking to U.S. officials is important no matter what Trump does.
The best decisions for us to be making right now, in light of what he has put on the table, is to meet with our counterparts, advocate not only for Canada, but to advocate for why the relationship that we have with the Americans is mutually beneficial.
Carr says if tariffs are imposed next week, the diplomatic focus will switch to removing them. The 4 candidates running to replace Justin Trudeau as Liberal leader and Prime Minister faced off last night in a French-language debate in Montreal. Chrystia Freeland spoke about her experience dealing with U.S. President Donald Trump.
Parce que je l'ai déjà fait.
Because I've already done it. I've negotiated with Mr. Trump. I negotiated NAFTA, the new NAFTA, and we succeeded in getting a better agreement.
Mark Carney struggled at times with his French and at one point made a blunder when talking about the war in Gaza, a mistake that Freeland jumped in.
Nous sommes d'accord avec Hamas.
We all agree on Hamas, on a two-state
No, we don't agree with
solution.
Hamas. No, we're against
Hamas,
we're against
absolutely. Hamas, we are.
The English debate is tonight. You can watch it live starting at 8 p.m. Eastern on CBC News Network and on the CBC app. A retired farmer from McGregor is suing RCMP after an officer allegedly forced his way into his home and used a stun gun on him. In February 2023, RCMP were called to Braun's home after receiving a call to keep the peace by a friend of Braun's former spouse who was helping her move out as a result of a separation. That's according to a lawsuit filed in court of King's Bench last week. Leonard Braun is seeking chartered damages in addition to other restitution. Braun was arrested for assaulting the officer, but the charge was stayed after the Mountie testified midway through the trial. Lawyer Carl Goenluck filed the lawsuit in Manitoba Court of King's Bench last week.
In our view, the officer's actions represented really a blatant disregard for Mr. Braun's charter rights to be free from that kind of action by police. Our feeling is that this is a way to get accountability for the actions of the RCMP.
The RCMP say they're not in a position to comment on an ongoing civil matter. On the edge of their seats at Canada Life Centre last night. Josh Morrissey on prime, scoring just seconds with left in regulation time, tying San Jose and forcing overtime. Mark Scheifele then scoring an OT and becoming the franchise leader in goals, 32 on the season. As for Morrissey, he was 2 minutes into a long shift when he scored the final tying goal.
Just hoped it didn't miss the net and I'd have to go back and get it again, but no, it was good. I mean, at the end of the game, want to be out there, and I guess that's why you skate lines and do all that stuff to be in shape for those moments.
So the Jets take a bite out of the Sharks 2-1, 10 straight wins for Winnipeg. Next up, the Jets are on the road to play in Ottawa tomorrow night. And that's the CBC News for Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
And Megan, that was so exciting. I was at the arena last night, and when that goal, oh my God, 26 seconds left in the game. The crowd was looking a little sleepy. Oh, are we done? Is it over? And just electrified the whole, like everyone up and just screaming at the same moment. It was so exciting.
Woke them up, that's for sure.
Definitely woke everyone up. Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
Megan Ketchison will be back with us throughout the morning here. Let's take a look now at our forecast across Manitoba and what the next few days have in store for us. Here's Abby.
Good morning. Once again, we got light snow falling in the northern parts of the province this morning. And if we look down south, we're seeing conditions in the Red River Valley region. We're looking at clear skies at this time. -2 in Winnipeg and surrounding areas. We're expecting a sunny start today with clouds rolling in late this morning. Then that would come with some southerly breeze accompanied by a high of +4 later in the day. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region. Morden, Winkler, Altoona, Morris all hovering around -3 at this time. Clear conditions also we're seeing there. Sunny start, a mix of sun and clouds will develop later, and we should be seeing highs around -4, +4, +5 for that region. Heading west to Brandon, -12 at this time. We are seeing freezing fog in that part of the province. That should should be clearing as you get into the morning. Then you see some sunny conditions. We're looking at highs of 3 degrees in that part of the province. Down in Dublin, we're seeing conditions, a bit of clear skies at this time, expecting a mix of sun and clouds. Currently, temperatures around -4. That fog you're noticing in that part of the province should be clearing this morning. Then you notice some light breeze picking up later. Highs will also be around 3 degrees today. In Gimli, we're looking at conditions around -4. Clear skies. The Interlake region today should see sunny conditions throughout the day. Light southerly breeze will peak up this morning. Highs will be around +4. Then we turn to the Power Flim Flon. We're seeing temperatures around -6. Light snow, that part of the province falling at this time. You should expect it today. Highs will be around -1, though it's going to feel colder with a wind chill around -12 for that part of the province. Moving north to Thompson, currently at -15, also light snow falling. We will see these periods of snow continue throughout the day. That part of the province should see around 2 centimeters of snow snow once the system moves out of that part of the region. Temperatures will drop to around minus 16 this morning before rising again, and the wind chill feels like minus 20 at this time. Further north in Churchill, currently minus 29. Clear conditions you're seeing. Expect sunny conditions, though the cold is still hanging back around minus 25. That's what your high would feel like. But the wind chill is in the range of minus 26, 27 this morning. So frostbite can happen in minutes. In summary, Margot, down south, sunny conditions we're seeing, but up north we're seeing snow.
All right, Abby, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Corey is watching the commute for us. Hey, Corey.
Hi, you got a call on the commuter line. Had nothing to do with the commute, but I think it's a helpful reminder. Richard called. He said he's eating pizza for breakfast this morning because I think like many Winnipeggers, he uses his garage as an extended freezer.
Oh, yes.
But then he realized this morning that, it went above zero, that his pizza is actually thawing in his garage. So he was like, oh, shoot. So he had to go and eat his pizza. So here's your public service announcement for the day. Maybe check your extended garage freezer or porch freezer, whatever you use, because you might have some stuff thawing there today.
That is the greatest excuse to have pizza at this time of day that I've ever heard.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe he was. Yeah, exactly. But other than that, haven't got any calls about any issues out there. Haven't done anything on the highways. Things are looking fairly smooth. But of course, I am curious. Haven't got any calls about potholes, but I know there's probably a few that just are forming in the last little bit with this freeze thaw. Yeah. So first person to call about a pothole gets a radio high five. I don't have any prizes to give away. So,
well, I have to say to you and Richard and everyone else, the idea of pizza for breakfast when my children were very small, and we were out visiting my parents. And they wanted something exciting for breakfast because we're at Nana's. And they said, well, what can we have? And she said, well, let's have pizza. And they said, pizza for breakfast? And they looked at me, Mom, can we? And I'm like, well, of course. And they never forgot it. So it became a somewhat regular thing in our household to have pizza for breakfast.
And why not? Yeah, why exactly. Not? Who says you can't? Give me a call, though, if you want to tell me about the commute or if you're eating for pizza for breakfast too this morning. Let me know. 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks very much, Corey. I'm Margot Watt in for Marcy Marcusa today. You're listening to Information Radio, 89.3 FM, and on YouTube. Time now to check out what's happening in the world of business. And Crystalie Ramlakan is back with us. Hi, Crystalie.
Hey, good morning, Margot.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, pretty good, thank you. Another mild day, so we like that.
Nice. That is a nice reprieve for Manitobans and Winnipeggers, for sure.
It's a nice little mini break. So we know that U.S. President Donald Trump is going to be going forward with those tariffs, 25% on most imports from Canada next week. How are Canadian officials responding?
Yeah, so Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says Canada needs to send the message it will fight back. So she says many of the threats target countries around the globe, so it's critical to connect with those allies to come up with a strong response. Now, experts and Canadian leaders have also said it's likely the threats are a negotiating tactic to try to rattle Canada and Mexico ahead of this mandatory review of the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement next year. Now, Trump's executive order to implement tariffs was delayed until March 4th after Canada agreed to introduce new security measures at the border. But U.S. Customs and Border Patrol data shows the number of people and drugs crossing illegally into the U.S. from Canada is minuscule compared to the volume coming across the U.S.'s southern border. And we've been seeing federal ministers and premiers have been cycling through Washington to find out what it's going to take to get Trump to abandon his tariff plans. But despite that diplomatic push, it's just still not clear what Trump wants in exchange for dropping tariff threats for good. But Canada has vowed if tariffs are implemented, it will hit back with retaliatory levies on billions of dollars worth of American goods.
And as these tensions continue, one large Canadian company is reversing its plans to move south of the border.
Yes, so trucking company TFI International has changed its decision to move its legal headquarters to the U.S. The Montreal-based company is backing down after shareholders expressed opposition to the idea. So TFI is the fourth largest for-hire carrier in North America, and last week it announced it would relocate to boost U.S. investment. Almost 3/4 of TFI's business now comes from the U.S. after an acquisition spree. So TFI has bought dozens of businesses over the years, but it also took on over $1 billion in debt last year, which has dragged on earnings. And profits also dropped in the latest quarter amid stronger competition and weaker demand. However, yesterday evening, the company said the move won't happen after all. And the relocation was opposed by one of the company's largest shareholders, a public pension manager that actually has a mandate to boost the economic development of Quebec.
And we hear Starbucks is facing layoffs.
Yeah, that's right. So the coffee giant is cutting 1,100 corporate employees globally as the company undergoes dramatic changes. In a letter to employees, the new CEO, Brian Nichols, says he is trying to streamline operations. Now, Starbucks has 16,000 corporate employees worldwide, but roasting and warehouse staff and baristas are not going to be impacted by these layoffs. And Starbucks has also not confirmed whether any Canadian employees are going to be affected. But Starbucks hired Nichols last fall to try to turn around sluggish sales. He wants to improve service times, especially during the morning rush, and reestablish stores as community gathering places. So far, he's cut some of the items from the menu to try to streamline things. And he's also experimenting with the company's ordering algorithms to try to better handle that mix of, mobile, drive-through, and in-store orders.
What's happening on the market so far this morning?
In Europe, healthcare stocks are lifting markets higher. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, markets are trading lower. Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all down. Oil is down 23 cents to $70.47 US per barrel. Gold is down $19.40 to $2,933.90 US per ounce. And the dollar is down 0.04 of a cent to 70.1 cents US.
Thanks very much, Crystalie.
Okay, thanks, Margot.
Take care. Crystalie Ramlakan with the business news. Coming up on Information Radio, a look at Canada's family doctor shortage.
Everywhere she goes is, sorry, we're not accepting. It's just a nightmare.
I have not had a GP for 7 years.
Usually they're not taking any new patients, or I just can't find none.
We're not very hopeful that we'll have a family doctor for any of us in the next few years.
I won't be able to easily find another one for possibly years.
There's nowhere to go. There's no doctor to talk to, even just to get advice. Even calling 811, they're like, well, just bring him to emergency.
We'll hear about a special series on CBC called The Cure. That's coming up after 7.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
It is 6:46, minus 1 degree in Winnipeg, on our way to a high of 4 degrees today. All 4 Liberal Party leadership candidates squared off in the first of 2 debates last night in Montreal. Frank Baylis, Mark Carney, Karina Gould, and Chrystia Freeland participated in the French language debate. The moderator asked them at one point when would they drop the writ following the selection of a Liberal leader. Here's Karina Gould responding first in French, followed by Carney, Freeland, and Baylis. You will hear the English translation over the candidates.
At what point would you drop the writ? I can answer quickly. It depends where Canada is at that point in time. If we're in a tariff war with the United States, then we'll have to see what the best option is for Canada. Mr. Carney now.
Exactly.
We should never take a decision until we have to.
Before you have to make that decision. I agree with what Ms. Gould has said.
sondages, mais M. Trump ne cesse de dire, ça me tente plus de parler avec Trudeau parce qu'il n'y a plus de pouvoir.
So we don't want to talk to Trudeau because he doesn't have any power. We want to talk to someone else who's going to be an elected representative.
Yes.
Well, there has to be a government with a clear mandate and a strong mandate at that. It's better to have a Liberal government. Much better. Mr. Jobin, if you allow, there are circumstances, probably not the most probable circumstances, that things might happen. Things might happen by the middle of March. We'll make a decision accordingly.
I've been elected 4 times. I have a seat in the House of Commons. So as Prime Minister, I would have choices to make, and I would make my choice not on the basis of what the polls say, but on the basis of what's best for the national interest. If on March 10th we're in an economic war with the US, I would talk to provincial and territorial premiers, I would talk to the unions, I would talk to business people, and we would together decide whether Canada should go to an election or keep a stable government. And given the fact that I have a seat in the House of Commons, I would be able to make that decision and decide what is best for Canada.
30 seconds for Mr. Bayless, because then it'll be your closing statements.
Well, with the threat of President Trump, it's essential that we have a stable government in place. The problem, of course, is that M. Poilievre is putting his personal ambitions ahead of national interest. So if it was possible to reach an agreement with Mr. Poilievre and say, listen, we need to be strong and united right now so that we can defend ourselves against Trump, that would be wonderful. But if he doesn't want to play along and he puts his own interest ahead of Canada, he's going to force our hand.
Time's out.
And that is from the French language Liberal leadership debate in Montreal last night. And they'll be squaring off again tonight, this time in English. Tonight's verbal face-off is the final one before a new federal Liberal leader is chosen on March 9th. For more on this, we have reached Ryan Tumblety. He's a political reporter with the Toronto Star. Joins us from Ottawa. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how did the candidates perform last night?
I think they all performed reasonably well, but this wasn't one of those sort of very contested, elbows up, going for the jugular type debates. These are all Liberals. They all agree with each other ultimately. So you didn't see too many huge differences between all of them.
Yeah, I might have seen more elbows at the Jets game last night than in the debate, so it was a somewhat friendly affair, hey?
Yeah, I mean, all these candidates are competing for the same pool of voters. They're all thinking about, getting second and third ballot support from, contenders who might drop out of the race as the votes are counted. And they're also all thinking about the general election as well. None of them want to see their leader come out of this process badly beaten up and ready to be destroyed by Pierre Poilievre, frankly. So I think they're all trying to avoid, giving fodder to future attack ads.
There was a lot of talk before the debate about Carney's fluency in French. What's the verdict there?
Yeah, I think he certainly struggled at times. You could see him halting to get his words out at moments. There was certainly one exchange where I think he got his language mixed up and he said he agreed with Hamas. I think what he meant to say was that he agreed on Hamas, on what the other candidates were saying about the terrorist organization. And that is a real struggle. Krista Freeland and Karina Gould helped him in that moment. But you're not going to get that help from Pierre Poilievre or Yves-François Blanchet in a debate. So I think it is something clearly that he knows he has to work on. He's been candid about that. He talked about that in the post-debate interviews and scrums. So it will be interesting to see how this all plays out.
How much did the candidates get into the nuts and bolts of policy?
Yeah, again, you are talking about an audience that is primed for that. They want to hear the nuts and bolts. And they did get into a fair bit of that. So, on something, for example, like the defense spending target, the NATO target. They didn't just say that they intend to meet it. They all talked about how quickly, what year they would meet it by, and how they would do that, whether it be, increases to Canadian Forces members' salaries or buying defense equipment, and even where to buy that defense equipment from. So, these are partisans. These are people really engaged in politics already. They're party members, after all. So there was an appetite for the details, and I think we got into some of that.
Visibly absent from the stage was Winnipeg-born Ruby Della. What do you make of the fact that she has been disqualified from the race, and how has her absence changed the race?
Yeah, she was disqualified on Friday and then lost an appeal of that disqualification yesterday. The party has said that it has to do with campaign finance issues and irregularities there that they were not able to resolve. I think her disqualification, I don't think really drastically changes the race. She had no caucus support. She had the lowest fundraising total of any of the contenders. What was really different about her was her policies. They were drastically different. Certainly from what Liberals have put forward and what from anyone on the debate stage last night put forward. She was emphasizing the need to do big deportations of illegal immigrants. She was talking about pulling Canada out of the Paris Climate Accords, musing even about pulling Canada out of NATO. So it was her campaign was a real outsider campaign. She was outside the mainstream of Liberal Party thinking, but even Canadian politics thinking on a lot of issues. So I'm not sure she'll have a big impact because I'm not sure most Liberal Party members were looking to support her.
Now, Carney is the front runner going into tonight's debate and will likely be more comfortable debating in English. What will be his strategy?
Yeah, he is the front runner, as you say. I think in that regard, he is going to be looking to do a no mistakes kind of campaign. I don't think he wants to. The risk reward ratio here, he could, yes, become more of the front runner. But if he makes a big mistake, he loses. So, it's very, it's a very difficult balance for him. And I think he's going to want to play it safe. I think he's going to want to make sure he makes no big mistakes, doesn't swing too hard and fall. And I think, that's how he's going to preserve his front runner status.
So what will you be watching for tonight?
Yeah, we've talked about all this sort of balance here about how to go around attacking a candidate without attacking them too hard. I will be interested to see tonight. We're going to see them not having to worry about the language issues because all of these candidates have English as their first language. They're comfortable. Do the attacks become any sharper? Or are they all still, going with a very measured, balanced approach?
Ryan, great to have you here. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Ryan Tumulty is a political reporter with the Toronto Star, and we reached him in Ottawa. Let's get the very latest now from our CBC Winnipeg newsroom. Here's Megan Ketchison.
Well, good morning. Manitoba's top doctor is urging you to get the flu shot amid a late spike in cases. Influenza cases are trending upwards past their normal peak this winter. Chief Provincial Public Health Officer Dr. Brent Rusin says the uptick is putting a strain on the healthcare system. And a retired farmer in McGregor is suing an RCMP officer who allegedly forced his way into his home and used a stun gun on him. His lawyer argues his client's charter rights were breached. And we'll have more coming up at 7:30.
All right, Megan, thanks very much.
Thank you.
If you have anything to tell us about the drive-in this morning, any problems or concerns, we welcome your calls as always. Our commuter line is 204-788-3093, and we appreciate you being our eyes and ears out there for us. Still to come here on our program, February is Psychology Month, and coming up we'll hear about a psychologist who has found an innovative way to put patients at ease before they undergo surgery, and it involves using virtual reality. Isn't that interesting? Also later in the show, we'll meet a Winnipeg group that's fighting to prevent arson in the city's North End and also working to preserve history in that neighborhood of our city. Winnipeg weather, we continue our nice little mild streak, a high of 4 degrees for today. We're at -1 right now in the city. Tonight, becoming cloudy with a low of -4, We'll have a wind chill of about -10, so not as bad as we had a week ago, of course, but still a bit of a wind chill throughout today as well. Tomorrow will be partly sunny with a high of +3 degrees. Right now we are cloudy and -1 here in the city of Winnipeg. You're with Information Radio here on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. I'm Margot Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa, and World Report is up next.
On The Current.
I love my son and I am happy to be his mother, but I feel lied to about parenthood.
Loving your kids is inevitable, expectant parents are told, but some mothers and fathers are admitting on social media that there is regret mixed in with that affection. Why some parents are coming clean about these feelings they've been hiding, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. One debate down, one to go. Liberal leadership hopefuls Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gould, and Frank Baylis made it through last night's French language debate. Tonight they do it again in English. As Tom Perry reports, the four contenders have so far mostly agreed on the big issues, especially the threat posed to Canada by U.S. President Donald Trump.
Bienvenue à ce débat en français à la course.
It was a remarkably polite affair. The four candidates for Liberal leadership avoiding any harsh attacks on each other, focusing instead on who would be best to take on a common foe, U.S. President Donald Trump.
Je l'ai déjà fait.
Former Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland pointing out she negotiated a new North American free trade agreement with the first Trump administration.
Le Trump d'aujourd'hui.
Former Bank of Canada and Bank of England Governor Mark Carney argued Trump today is more aggressive and isolationist, and that he has a plan to make Canada's economy less reliant on the U.S. But Carney, at times, stumbled in French.
Nous sommes d'accord avec Hamas, nous sommes d'accord avec une two-state...
Nous ne sommes pas d'accord avec Hamas, mais concernant Hamas.
Carney's rivals correcting him during a discussion on the Middle East when he mistakenly said he agreed with Hamas. The two other contenders, businessman and former Liberal MP Frank Baylis and former government House Leader Karina Gould, both more fluent and more comfortable on this night.
Voilà, faire les débats à cet niveau.
Gould offering Carney some sympathy afterwards, acknowledging that debating in your second language at this level is difficult. There'll be no excuses tonight when the four contenders square off again, this time in English. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
China's foreign ministry says it has lodged a diplomatic protest against Canada. It says the new sanctions Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced yesterday lack a basis in international law. Ottawa is unleashing a new round of economic punishments on 76 individuals and entities. All of them are accused of supporting the Kremlin's war in Ukraine by helping to transport military equipment, technology, or key drone components to Russia. According to some estimates, 80% of the components in Russian military drones are coming from China. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the defence and security of the British people must come first. Starmer is addressing Parliament about the UK's ongoing support for Ukraine. He is expected to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump tomorrow in Washington. Starmer says Britain is increasing defense spending.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defense spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defense, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
That is about £13.4 billion more a year through 2027, the equivalent of 24 billion Canadian dollars. But Starmer says it will come at a cost. It will have to cut its development assistance to other countries like Sudan, Ukraine, and Gaza. Police in Halifax are still trying to determine why a woman stabbed a 6-year-old boy. Investigators say the two did not know each other, but the woman was known to police. And the CBC's Kayla Hounsell reports her mother says she's been trying to get help for years.
It happened in the middle of the afternoon on a busy transit thoroughfare in downtown Halifax. A 6-year-old boy stabbed multiple times, attacked by someone he doesn't know, taken to hospital with life-threatening injuries.
It's a very, very tragic incident.
Halifax Regional Police Constable Martin Cromwell says officers were called around 1:20 Sunday. Police say one of the boy's parents was instrumental in ensuring the suspect remained on scene. Investigators have charged 19-year-old Elliot Chorney with attempted murder and possession of a weapon dangerous to public peace. Crown Attorney Michael Cody is prosecuting the case.
I confirm these are very serious allegations, of course very tragic. I confirm the Public Prosecution Service works every day to protect the public by applying the law, the criminal code, and is going to continue to do so into the future.
Court documents show Chorney is also facing a previous assault charge. Nova Scotia Health says she was allegedly involved in an incident at a Halifax hospital last month. The doctor involved is not commenting as that case is also still before the courts. Chorney's mother tells CBC News her daughter was experiencing homelessness and that she wasn't living at home because it wasn't safe for her other child. She is a severely unwell person, and her father and I have been trying desperately for years to get her the help she needs, she wrote in a social media post. For now, Chorney will remain in custody. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
Pope Francis is showing a slight improvement after another night in hospital. The Vatican says the 88-year-old is in critical condition. He is battling pneumonia and bronchitis. The Pope is also showing early signs of renal failure, but that is said to be under control. Francis has been in hospital for 11 days now. Thousands of people have passed through St. Peter's Square to pray for the Pope. The threat of U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs is already affecting Canada's construction industry. It's driving up the costs of bigger residential projects, and experts warn it could make the housing crisis even worse. Lauren Bird reports.
Steel I-beams make up the structure of almost every high-rise. Canada doesn't manufacture a lot of them. Most are imported. Keenan Loomis is the president and CEO of the Canadian Institute of Steel Construction.
But it will be subject to retaliatory tariffs if the government of Canada decides that that's a product that they are going to impact with tariffs.
Steel is on a long list of items the Canadian government says it will tariff in response to Donald Trump's tariff threats. Much of that list are things required for building homes and high-rises: flooring, shingles, windows, lumber. When those costs go up for builders, eventually it goes up for the buyer. Scott Anderson is the head of the Ontario Home Builders Association.
Anything that is in high demand going into home construction, cement, rebar, things like that, if there are tariffs that are hitting those, it's just going to continue to drive the costs up.
But some builders may decide the added cost is too much to make a project viable. Michael Brooks is the head of the Real Property Association of Canada, which represents the real estate investment and development sector.
I've already heard about projects for new housing, new apartments being shelved just because of the uncertainty.
And for a country already in a housing crisis, experts say anything that makes housing more expensive or harder to build will likely lead to supply issues down the road. Lauren Bird, CBC News, Toronto.
Yeah, we're navigating.
Canadian Navy ship HMCS Margaret Brooks is on its way to Antarctica. It is supporting a scientific expedition led by Canadian scientists. And CBC News is the only media outlet on board the vessel. International climate correspondent Susan Ormiston joins us now from southern Chile. And Susan, where exactly are you?
Yeah, we're navigating the Beagle Channel. It's in the extreme southern tip of South America between Chile and Argentina. The channel was named after an HMS Beagle ship in the 1800s and carried Charles Darwin here in 1833. It's pretty dramatic scenery as we head south towards Antarctica.
And what is the purpose of this Navy mission?
Well, this is a first. The Canadian Navy has never sailed this far south to the tip of South America and never hosted a science expedition like this. The icy continent is warming at an accelerating rate, not unlike the Arctic. And 15 scientists from Canada will be measuring the extent of those changes, drilling ice cores, taking sea and snow samples, analyzing how much contaminants like microplastics have made it down here. You know, the Antarctic really helps to regulate our climate. It's hugely important, and it's a pristine lab to gauge what's happening and compare it to the Canadian Arctic. Terry Scher is the commanding officer of HMCS Margaret Brooke, and she says the Navy is facilitating science diplomacy.
We don't have any aspect of sovereignty down in Antarctica. That's not at all our mandate here. We've done everything possible, basically short of painting the ship white and red before we left Punta Arenas to really make sure that, you know, we're seen as wanting to be collaborative and helping to support the science piece. And we're not at all down there as a quote-unquote warship.
In fact, Antarctica is governed by an international treaty which bans military activity inside the area. There's lots of research stations, and we have to cross the Drake Passage before we get to Antarctica proper. That's where we're going.
That sounds awesome. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
Our international climate correspondent, Susan Ormiston, on board HMCS Margaret Brooke. CBC News will be covering the Antarctica mission over the next 3 weeks. And that is the latest from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and YouTube. I'm Margo Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Coming up on this hour of the program, tariffs on aluminum could make the cost of a beer can a few cents higher. We'll find out what that increase could mean for a local business. A special series we're starting here at CBC called The Cure as we explore Canada's family doctor shortage. And still in the world of medicine, this is February and it's also Psychology Month. We'll hear from a Manitoba psychologist who is using virtual reality to ease patients' anxiety before they undergo surgery. You're with Information Radio, 89.3 FM and on YouTube. From the CBC Winnipeg newsroom, Megan Ketchison is with us. Good morning, Megan.
Good morning. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump says tariffs on Canadian goods are going ahead, and Canada is still trying to use diplomacy to stave them off. Winnipeg South MP Ben Carr is part of another delegation in Washington, D.C. We'll hear why he thinks it's important to still go. And Manitoba's top doctor is urging you to get the flu shot amid a late spike in cases. Influenza cases are trending upwards past their normal peak this winter, and they say it's putting a strain on the healthcare system. And I'll have more at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Abby is here with a look at the forecast. And I noticed, Abby, last night when I went to the Jets game that so many fans were out walking to the arena just in their jerseys.
Yeah,
no jacket, no gloves, not a care in the world.
And that stretch still continues.
Nice.
One other thing I've been noticing, Margo, is have you noticed the sunset now is on the flip side of 6 p.m.?
Yes.
So we're getting more like two more minutes again.
It is nice. Every moment counts.
Yeah, every moment counts. It's similar to today, a bright and sunny start across the province. We should be seeing the sunrise about in 7-8 minutes from now. We should see the sunrise over Winnipeg. with some cloud cover moving in later. Snow continues in the northern part of the province, but it's going to be mild down south. Conditions for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, we're looking at temperatures around -3 at this time, clear outside. As mentioned, that cloud is going to be crashing the party late in the morning. We'll see some southerly breeze, and then we warm up to a high of +4. Tonight, partly cloudy conditions will continue into the overnight. Then we see a low of -4. Tomorrow, we're looking at a little bit of everything in the forecast. Some sun, some clouds, and some southwest breeze by midday. So it's still going to be mild tomorrow, but up north is just where we have that snow still lingering in Churchill, Thompson, and surrounding areas. But right now, Winnipeg, -3, sunny start to the day, and we warm up to 4 degrees.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
With a look at the drive-in, or perhaps you're driving home somewhere after working, Corey's here.
Yes. I'm of two minds about the sunset going a little bit later because I welcome the more sun, but I'm noticing it's tougher and tougher to get my toddler to bed every day. He's just like a little bit more
Well,
amped
that'll
up.
just get better in the coming months.
Yeah, I know, right? Mid-June, I'm like, oh no, what's going to happen? Anyways, it's really been a fairly quiet commute overall, but I did put a shout out for people to call in with potholes they're starting to notice. And sure enough, got a call from Paul. He said in the St. Vital area, there's around Meadowood and St. Mary's, there's a bunch of potholes there starting to form, and I imagine they'll only get bigger and bigger. He said the city's already been on it and tried to fill a few, but a few more popped up. It's a little whack-a-mole. So if you have any other reports on potholes you're seeing, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, or if you're seeing anything else out there, let me know. Sidewalks are pretty slippery, but also slushy as well at the same time, so careful on the sidewalks. 204-788-3093.
Well, if you are living without a family doctor, you are not alone.
Everywhere she goes, it's sorry, we're not accepting. It's just a nightmare.
I have not had a GP for 7 years.
Usually they're not taking any new patients, or I just can't find none.
We're not very hopeful that we'll have a family doctor for any of us in the next few years.
I won't be able to easily find another one for possibly years.
There's nowhere to go. There's no doctor to talk to, even just to get advice. Even calling 811, they're like, well, just bring him to emergency.
From Victoria to Charlottetown, millions of Canadians are in the same position. People everywhere are accessing primary care through emergency departments, long waits at walk-in clinics, or using private or virtual care. So what's being done to fix this problem? CBC News is launching a special series called The Cure. We're speaking with patients, doctors, and experts from across the country about their work to find strategies and solutions to remedy this care crisis. Reporter Heather Gillis spoke to Information Radio host Marcy Marcusa about this earlier. Here is their conversation.
Good morning.
So just how bad is the situation?
Well, an estimated 6.5 million Canadians don't have access to a family doctor or a nurse practitioner. And that impacts everyone really personally and uniquely, of course. So I was speaking with a woman named Kristen Walsh. She lives in Conception Bay South, Newfoundland and Labrador, and she has a rare type of arthritis, polycystic kidney disease, and ADHD. Now, Walsh doesn't have a family doctor, so she's shelling out $70 a visit to see a nurse practitioner in a private clinic.
And then there was a point where I had a lot of edema, like leg swelling. So I was going like almost every week to see like, has the swelling improved with the medication change, or do I need to make another change? And every visit is a subsequent like cost. So it can get very costly, and it's also not covered by private insurance.
So Walsh is a pharmacist, and she sees what this shortage means every day and says many people who come to see her in the pharmacy don't know where to turn for care. A new report on the healthcare workforce from Health Canada says we need 50% more family doctors. So when you break it down, it's 23,000 right now. And it's a number that could balloon as thousands more doctors who are part of the baby boomer generation retire or consider retiring. Here's Dr. Joss Reimer. She's president of the Canadian Medical Association, and she's based in Winnipeg.
And that, to me, is a jaw-dropping number. And it really does reflect what we're seeing on the ground, but to see it written out in those numbers is quite dramatic and sobering, and we need to be doing everything that we can to increase those numbers of family physicians, but also trying to find other solutions that are separate from just increasing the number of doctors.
So Dr. Reimer is talking solutions there, but what solutions are in the works already?
Yeah, well, we found coast to coast to coast, there are about a half dozen key strategies that provinces and territories to varying degrees are looking to implement. And the first concern creating more time for doctors with their patients. So you could expand the scope of practice for other healthcare professionals. Now, that would allow nurse practitioners, pharmacists, other health care professionals to do work that overlaps with what family doctors traditionally do. The other part is reducing the administrative burden. So many family doctors say they spend the equivalent of a full workday each week, some longer, filling out paperwork. So that's insurance forms, things for your benefits, sick notes. And doctors say if things were more streamlined, their lives would be easier. It would free up more time for their patients. Here's Dr. Rita McCracken. She's a family physician and a primary care researcher at the University of British Columbia.
So if I want to send somebody for an x-ray, there's not one x-ray form that I can fill out on my electronic medical record. In my EMR, there's about 300. Each imaging facility has their own. Now, some imaging facilities will accept the ones from others, others not. So that, me needing to sort that out for just getting a chest x-ray in a child who I'm worried about having pneumonia, that's preposterous. We need to be streamlining all of those pieces of paper.
So freeing up time is one aspect. What else is being considered?
Better pay. So in BC, for example, they launched a new payment model in 2023, and it boosted family doctor pay from about $250,000 up to $385,000. But this new model also fixes some of the problems that doctors had with that old fee-for-service model, where doctors saw a patient for a fee or provided a service for a fee. The new model, it compensates for the broad range of work that doctors really do, the things like charting and writing your referrals or chasing down your test results and that paperwork that we talked about. Things that weren't paid for before now are, and there are also fees that doctors receive for the number of patients that are on their roster and the complexity of each of those patients. So since it started about 2 years ago, BC says they've attracted about 1,000 new family doctors. Now, of course, like anything, it's not perfect. Dr. McCracken says work to get more patients attached to more doctors has to continue.
Which means that the capacity in the system in terms of how many patients can I look after, there hasn't really been a change with the new payment model.
So another initiative I understand takes us sort of thinking outside of the country.
That's right. So about a third of family doctors in Canada are trained elsewhere. So it's a vast pool that recruiters want to draw from. But assessment and accreditation pathways in this country and each of the provinces, well, it's slow and it's complex to navigate. So Nova Scotia's trying something different. They're starting up a physician assessment center of excellence. So what's going to happen there is doctors who are currently licensed to work in Nova Scotia will work side by side with some of these candidates, and they'll assess them in real time to see if they're up to the Canadian standard. And it can cut the process down from 18 months to about 12 weeks. Dr. Gus Grant is the registrar of the Nova Scotia College of Physicians and Surgeons, which is running that program.
What we're trying to do here is to develop a better, quicker, reliable, safe way to identify competent physicians.
Now, this clinic could add up to 40 doctors to the system every year when it's fully up and running. It's in the early stages now. Grant says it's going to be a big help because Canada underproduces doctors, fewer than other OECD countries. Only about 1,700 graduate each year, which isn't enough to fill that big gap that we were talking about earlier. And so that brings us to yet another strategy, which is graduating more doctors. So we see in BC, Ontario, PEI, they're opening up new med schools. But in the Yukon, they're trying something too, and it's a new residency program. Dr. Derek Bryant is the president of the Medical Association there.
Essentially, the hope is that we would have the ability to train family doctors locally here, because currently there is no option to do that.
And his goal is to have some young doctors train, set down a few roots, and stay. But the earliest that might happen is 2027.
You hear it said that a lot of young doctors are turning away from family medicine, though they're pursuing other specialties. So is there a strategy to, capitalize on that?
Yeah. It's team-based care, and it's something that we're seeing in every province and territory. But just last month in Ontario, they announced they're going to pump $1.4 billion into a big plan to connect 2 million people to family doctors over 4 years. And team-based care, big part of that. Across the country, though, we did hear from a lot of doctors, especially young ones, saying that they don't want to carry the load all by themselves and be business owners of these medical practices. So the idea is to get nurse practitioners, physiotherapists, social workers, counselors, everyone working together within their own scope of practice, but efficiently. And in Manitoba, the association president, Dr. Nichelle Desilets, says doctors want to work together. They want to work in teams.
So I think one of the faster solutions is to invest in physician-led team-based care, because this is using resources and people and relationships that already potentially exist and restructuring the way we think about accessing care in the healthcare system, restructuring how we work with each other to increase access for more people sooner.
So the solutions that we were just talking about, the cure to this care crisis, well, it can't come fast enough for people like Kristen Walsh.
I think it's a huge problem. I think we're already in a healthcare crisis. I think that we're seeing people slip through the cracks every day.
Heather, thank you for this.
Thank you.
Heather Gillis is a reporter with CBC News. She was speaking with Information Radio host Marcy Marcusa. If you would like to read more about this, just head to our website, cbc.ca/news, and look for The Cure.
Here's to the bold. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it.
It is 7:24. You're with Information Radio, 89.3 FM, and on YouTube. And I'm Marco Watt in for Marcy this morning. We're at -1 degree here in the city, so out on the streets and even on the sidewalks, watch for some slippery sections as we've had some freezing overnight and then a little bit of melting. If you see anything you think we should know about, you can let us know on the commuter line, and that is 204-788-3093. Weather-wise, we'll be relatively mild again today, a high of +4, bit of a wind chill this morning, but nothing like what we saw in the past week or so. For tomorrow, partly sunny again, and a high of +3. Still to come here on the program, tariffs on aluminum could make the cost of a beer can a little higher. We'll find out what that increase could mean for one local business. We'll also talk to some Winnipeggers who are coming together to fight arson in the city's North End. They're actually having a meeting this evening to talk more about that after some recent fires, especially the Sutherland Hotel fire that happened back in January. So we'll learn more about what they're hoping to do as they look for solutions, and that's still to come on Information Radio. I still can't believe I'm awake after the Jets game last night. Oh my goodness, it was so exciting. Went into overtime. Scott Regehr has all the details for us with Morning Sports. Good morning, Scott.
You were a good luck charm, as it turns out, Mark.
Well, I don't know if it was
Did you
me.
stay till the bitter end? Tell the truth.
Absolutely, I did.
Oh, there you go.
And when that clock hit 26 seconds and that goal came to send us into the overtime, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I'm still here because it got so exciting.
Right, and for folks who missed it, it was a home game against San Jose. The Sharks leading this one till the very bitter end when Josh Morrissey scored that goal you're talking about to send it into OT, which just set up more drama. Mark Scheifele ended it. 2-1 Jets, and it was an historic marker from Scheifele, the 329th of his career, which means he surpasses Ilya Kovalchuk on the franchise's all-time list. This is 2.0 version of the Jets, of course. Morrissey offered his thoughts on his teammate Scheifele.
I've been thinking about that goal probably more than him. For him to get the record, I mean, what an accomplishment. What he means to the city, this organization, from basically day one that the Jets came back. I mean, the first pick and, you know, everything he's done in this community for the fan base. I mean, you saw the fans embrace him and, you know, it's special. So he's one of my best friends and just so happy for him. He works so hard and, you know, that's a lot of goals, so it's pretty impressive.
It helps when the core of your team is close, and you can just tell in that clip from Josh Morrissey how much he admires Mark Scheifele. So this all bodes very well for the Jets, who are back atop the league standings. Remember, they had the best start in NHL history before hitting a definite lull for a month or so, but they're back at it. 10 straight wins, and despite this, odds makers in Vegas, they don't even list the Jets in the top 2 of Canadian teams to possibly win the Cup.
Oh, come on.
They've got the Leafs and the Oilers ahead of Winnipeg, which is listed. The Jets are listed at 12.5 to 1 shots at ending this long Canadian Cup drought of 32 years.
Oh,
12 to 1?
What do they know?
Nothing.
You know, I think I mentioned this to you yesterday, Scott. I hadn't been to a NHL game for a very long time. And that moment, when that goal by Morrissey sent us into overtime, the crowd, which was maybe a little sleepy after, not much happening for a little while, you could say, suddenly everyone was just on their feet screaming at the same second. It was so exciting. Just amazing to be there.
Awesome. Well, you picked the right game to return to.
Absolutely. So let's move over to triathlon, where there's been a rare win by a Canadian on the World Cup Tour.
Right, with Desiree Reidner doing the honors, Margot, at an event in New Zealand. Reidner, who's from Cowichan Bay, BC, is the first Canadian woman to win on the tour in 12 years. Of course, Oak Bluff's Tyler Mislachuk has won 3 times in World Cup events for men. Now, getting back to Reidner, she won her race by swimming the required 1.5 kilometers, riding her bike another 40K before she finished off with a 10-kilometer long run. And still, after all that, she beat Australia's Emma Jeffcoat to the line by a mere 2 seconds.
I was pretty gassed, even with 200 meters to go. So I definitely emptied the tank. Happy I didn't throw up, which is nice. That typically happens, but yeah, it's a bit surreal. I'm trying to take it all in and actually appreciate what I've done and not just kind of toss it to the side. These things don't come around that often, so I think we really need to appreciate it when we do have a good result.
Yeah, Reidner comes by that perspective honestly, Margot. She was once a rising star in BC track and field and then fell off the map after a litany of injuries, including in one instance getting kicked in the head during a triathlon swim where she suffered a concussion. In another, she was riding her bike during a race and she was hit by a car. So she's gone through the ringer. She's 25 and she is back, as we saw over the weekend, beating the world's best.
What a comeback. And some good news for Canadian soccer fans.
Yeah, striker Daniel Jebison, Margot, is switching his allegiance from England internationally to Canada. He's 21 years old. He's been playing for Bournemouth of the English Premiership. He is the striker Canada needs behind Jonathan David. Daniel Jebison expected to make his Canadian debut next month in the Nations League finals.
All right, great stuff. Thank you, Scott.
You bet.
Scott Regehr with Morning Sports. Time now for CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's mainly clear and -3, sunny today, and a high of 4. Manitoba's top doctor is urging you to get the flu shot amid a late spike in cases. Influenza cases are trending upward past their normal peak this winter. Chief Provincial Public Health Officer Dr. Brent Rusin says the uptick is putting a strain on the healthcare system.
It's certainly not too late to get vaccinated. Our numbers are still climbing, and we often get that second wave of influenza. And so if you haven't yet been vaccinated, I would suggest you speak with our healthcare provider.
Influenza vaccination rates in Manitoba are down compared to the last flu season. Cases elsewhere in Canada have also been on the uptick in recent weeks. U.S. President Donald Trump said Monday, after a month-long pause, the threatened 25% tariff against Canadian goods will take effect next week. Trump defended the move, blaming previous administrations for allowing unfair trade deals.
We've been mistreated very badly by many countries, not just Canada and Mexico. The tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule. This is an abuse that took place for many, many years. And I'm not even blaming the other countries that did this. I blame our leadership for allowing it to happen.
Trump is threatening to impose the tariffs March 4th, despite improvements at the Canadian border, with the number of migrants apprehended and the quantity of drugs seized plummeting. U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threats have some Manitoba breweries feeling uncertain.
We're doing about 80 cans a minute.
Kevin Selch is the founder of Little Brown Jug Brewing in Winnipeg's Exchange District. The aluminum cans he uses comes from the U.S. He says it's still unclear what impact the tariffs will have on his costs and pricing.
As for the pricing, we really just have to wait and see how prices end up getting adjusted and whether we pass them on. We're not going to get in front of this with raising our prices before we need to.
U.S. President Donald Trump's plans to impose tariffs on Canada next week has some Canadians trying to use diplomacy to still stave them off. Winnipeg South MP Ben Carr is heading to Washington as part of another delegation.
The threat of a tariff could come to fruition. And if it does, then the next step will be to try to have it taken off the table as quickly as possible.
Carr says diplomacy remains useful in reminding Americans of our social, economic, and military ties. The four candidates looking to replace Justin Trudeau as Liberal leader and Prime Minister faced off last night on the debate stage. For Chrystia Freeland, Fred Bayalis, Karina Gould, and Mark Carney, the French language debate was the first opportunity for a joint discussion on the campaign's key issues. But in the end, the issue was Mark Carney's French. Janice McGregor has more.
Before the debate was even over, Conservatives pounced on one moment in particular, when Carney intended to say he agreed with the point Frank Bayless had made about Hamas, but it came out as Carney saying, "We agree with Hamas." Freeland, standing beside him, had to jump in and clarify what he meant so the error didn't stand. Here's how Carney and Bayless summed it up for reporters.
I said that we all were in agreement against Hamas, or at least the intention.
If we all get tripped up in different second language or third languages and that, I'm absolutely certain Mr. Carney did not mean to say he supported Hamas in any way.
At several points in the debate, rather than leave him to suffer for his miscommunication, Chrystia Freeland intervened to help Carney get his message out. Now, that's very helpful behavior for a loyal lieutenant, but it's going to be interesting to see what Liberal supporters make of these two rivals looking so chummy. Their debate ended with a hug, not a handshake. Janice McGregor, CBC News, Ottawa.
In Manitoba, a retired farmer in McGregor is suing an RCMP officer who allegedly forced his way into his home and used a stun gun on him. In February 2023, RCMP were called to Leonard Braun's home after receiving a call to help keep the peace by a friend of Braun's former spouse who was helping her move out as a result of a separation. That's according to the lawsuit filed in Court of King's Bench last week. He was charged with assaulting the officer after he refused to let him inside the house. Carl Gorenlock is Braun's lawyer. He argues his client's charter rights, which protect him against unreasonable search and arbitrary detention, were breached.
In our view, this Mr. Braun was essentially assaulted by an officer and then arrested and charged with assault police officer.
The Crown stayed the charge against Braun after the officer testified at the trial. A spokesperson from the RCMP declined to comment on an ongoing civil case. And that is the news from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
The CBC's Megan Ketchison. Let's take a look at the forecast across Manitoba with Abby.
It's going to be another mild day with increasing clouds down south. Up north, different story. We're seeing snow linger in the northern parts of the province. Currently, Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, we're looking at clear conditions, -3 at this time. Expect mostly cloudy conditions today. Highs would be around 3 degrees, and then tonight those clouds will stay with us all the way into the overnight period. We'll see temperatures dropping to -3 later. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region. Sunny starts, and then the clouds will move in. Highs around +3 also. Heading west to Brandon, -12 at this time. We're still seeing that freezing fog in the Westman and Parkland region. Today, anticipate cloudy conditions. Highs will be around 0 for Brandon, while for Dauphin, highs will be around 3 degrees. In Gimli, We're looking at cloudy conditions at this time, though you're going to see some sunny breaks. Today, you should anticipate those cloudy skies to come mixed with the sunny conditions you're going to get, and then a high of 2 degrees. Moving north, Thompson seeing light snow at this time, minus 14. We are sighting. Today, expect snow and flurries throughout the morning. No accumulation, though. Otherwise, mostly cloudy. We get to a high of minus 8. Further north in Churchill, we're seeing clear conditions at this time. Minus 29 is the current temperature there. Sunny skies you'd see, and then a high of minus 24. Though tonight we're going to get clear conditions. Temperatures will be dropping to around minus 29. Down south, we're seeing mostly cloudy conditions with mild temperatures around 3 degrees, warming up to 3 degrees. While up north, we're seeing colder temperatures with light snow and frigid weather in some parts of the northern part of the province. But compared to Winnipeg, it's kind of mild down here. If you're looking at conditions up north, that still remains significantly cold today.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
And Corey's here with a look at the commute.
Very quiet commute overall. Haven't heard of any major issues, but I got at least one call about potholes starting to form around St. Mary's Meadowood area from Paul's. So let's start the pothole report a little bit, because that freeze thaw, they're going to be popping up. So if you see some, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there, whether you're walking, biking, driving. I would love to hear from you. That number, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks very much, Corey.
Thank you.
Time right now is 7:37. Most of us know that surgery can be stressful and anxiety-inducing. Dr. Renee L. Gabalaoui wanted to figure out a way to help patients get over that as much as possible. She's a clinical health psychologist and associate professor at the University of Manitoba's Max Rady College of Medicine. And she's experimenting with using virtual reality to give patients a better understanding of what they can expect immediately before and after surgery. CBC's Jim Agapito went to the Health Sciences Centre to see it for himself. Now, the first voice you'll hear is the doctor, followed by Michelle Bahio, a breast cancer patient who tried the VR experience before her own surgery.
First, we're going to apply the headset and make sure it's comfortable. My name is Dr. Renee L. Gabalaoui. I'm an associate professor at the University of Manitoba. I'm cross-appointed in the departments of clinical health psychology and anesthesiology, perioperative and pain medicine. We had taken that original prototype that you had seen, and we developed it further to allow for being wheeled into the OR. My clinical practice is focused on medical trauma and adverse health events, and I saw a lot of patients coming in that were really highly anxious, and I started doing a lot of research in the area, and some of my own research has shown a really strong relationship between anxiety before surgery and complications after surgery, increased rates of rehospitalization, length of stay, quality of life, things that really matter to both patients and the system as a whole. I played around with it a lot. Thank you. The idea was, can we develop a virtual reality program that uses scientifically supported methods and treatments to be able to better support patients? For me, it was really important, though, that all the ideas didn't come from me and the literature, that it also came from patients and people with lived experience. So this will be a tour of the actual hospital environments. So we ran a number of studies where we built an initial virtual reality prototype that exposed people to the operating room environment.
I'm going to ask you to lie down now. Just put your head on the pillow and relax into the bed.
Like, this just feels very relaxed when the doctors are speaking and just explaining things.
Michelle has been an incredible part of this research journey. She was actually originally a person in our large feasibility study that trialed our prototype prior to her mastectomy.
It's time for your oxygen mask. Can I get you to put your head back on the pillow and look straight up at the ceiling?
She gave us all this feedback. She filled out questionnaires. She gave us verbal feedback throughout that whole process, before surgery, after surgery. She trialed it about 1 week before her breast cancer surgery. And then we invited her back later on to participate in focus groups. So there are groups of people who participated in that initial study to kind of talk about what they like, dislike, how we think we can grow the virtual reality and make it better. I'm gonna just take it off, Michelle, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was really powerful. It felt very real. Like having gone through surgery and seeing the operating room and meeting the doctors and seeing the equipment, this was very helpful because it was what I experienced in real life.
I did a lot of my training in the U.S. and I had some exposure there, and some. I actually was inspired through the military virtual reality in terms of deployment. That's where sort of that was a real inspiration for me. Is that they're preparing military personnel for deployment using virtual reality, right? So why can't we do the same thing with this really stressful medical experience, surgery, which is very traumatic and anxiety provoking for patients?
I'll let your medical team know that you're awake.
What we really see in our system is there is a great need for mental health support. And unfortunately, the resources are limited. That is no secret. And so we need to be thinking about innovative solutions. I think psychologists are in a really unique position because we function as clinician scientists. So we're trained as both researchers and clinicians to be able to develop this type of intervention to be able to support these patients. And I really have a lot of interest in sort of stepped care models. I see the value that, yes, you might need a psychologist for more severe issues, more complex issues, but if we can provide large support to a large number of people, then we can reserve our time and be able to really treat the people who need it the most.
The anxiety is high, like for anybody going through some medical procedures. And so if there's any way to just help yourself to like, breathe through it and realize that this is okay, we're gonna be okay. It's just, it is, I don't know, I can't put it into words really, the feeling that's there. It's relief.
What an experience. The CBC's Jim Agapito speaking with Michelle Bradley-Behio and Dr. Renee L. Gabalawi. They were at the Health Science Center in Winnipeg.
CBC Music Live. Head into the big venues, intimate concert halls, and small stages. Celebrate live music the way it was meant to be. Share in an unmistakable energy of being shoulder to shoulder with music fans and face to face with some of Canada's best musicians.
It's such an honor and a pleasure to play here.
CBC Music Live, brand new season. And catch past episodes right now on CBC Gem.
It is 7:43. Good morning. I'm Margo Watt in for Marcy this morning. You're with Information Radio on 89.3 FM and on YouTube. Minus 3 degrees right now here in Winnipeg. Well, it's been about 15 years since Amy Milan released some solo music, but that break is now over. The singer from Stars and Broken Social Scene has announced she's releasing a new solo album in May. And we have the first single. This is Wire Walks.
Hold on to bad news. I want to carry the sad out of you. You said at night when the day lost the light. If I'm walking on a wire, slightly bent without an anchor, could I come down without a fall?
That is Amy Milan with Wire Walks. Her new album is due out in May.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he will go ahead with a 25% tariff on most imports from Canada starting next week. Canadian businesses have been bracing for higher costs associated with those tariffs. Trump has also threatened an additional 25% tariff on steel, auto imports, and aluminum, with those tariffs set to take place March 12th. For breweries that use aluminum cans to package their beer products, they're taking a closer look at their numbers. CBC's Alana Cole checked in with Little Brown Jug Brewing Company here in Winnipeg. She spoke with founder Kevin Silch about how the tariffs could impact his business.
We are canning this morning. We're canning Winnipeg's iconic 1919 Belgian Pale Ale. All of the tall cans go into a big elevator over there where they're lifted up. The cans come in a stack that's almost 9 feet high. They get lifted up. An arm sweeps them onto a 4-wide conveyor. In the wintertime, it's our slower season, so we're canning a few times a week. But in the summertime, we could be canning 4 days a week. We can empty an 8,000-liter tank in a matter of probably 5 hours.
Okay, so these here are 16-ounce cans.
Yeah.
That's what you use. They're brought in from the U.S.
Yes, all 16-ounce cans, aluminum cans, are brought in from the U.S.
Why can't you get them in Canada or manufactured in Canada?
Nobody makes them in Canada. They do make the smaller cans, but the rolled aluminum actually comes from the United States as well, even for the smaller cans.
So how many of these cans would you say go through this brewery almost in a year? Like how many cans are we talking about? When we think about tariffs...
Yeah, it could be about 1.3 million cans, I would think, this next year.
So even a few cents makes a difference?
Yeah, I mean, in manufacturing, it's all about the cents. It's all about the efficiencies. Margins are really, really tight. So a 25-cent tariff could raise the price 5-6 cents, but that's across billions of cans in Canada. We go through over 1 million cans here at Little Brown Jug, so 5 cents does hit our bottom line. The other thing we're worried about is the countervailing tariff. So when it was proposed to put on the paperboard tariffs, that also would impact us through the cardboard and trays and other things that we use here in the brewery. The cardboard comes from either Canada or the US, but when Trump had proposed the original tariffs, one of the countervailing tariffs that Canada was going to impose as a retaliatory measure was going to be on paperboard. So if the raw material for the paperboard was coming in from the United States, we'd expect to be impacted from that as well. In Canada, we make a lot of aluminum. A lot of it goes to the United States. So even though some 12-ounce cans get made in Canada, we don't have a way of rolling aluminum in Canada. So it all gets rolled in the United States and then shipped back to Canada for those assemblies of the smaller cans.
Why the 16-ounce cans versus the 12-ounce cans that are manufactured here?
Packaging smaller, there's more waste, there's more expense. In some ways, by going to a smaller can, even though you save that little bit of aluminum, there wouldn't be that much saving passed on to the customer because it's such a small amount. But it is something we're looking at, and it's something we would definitely consider in the future.
So when you think about craft breweries like yours, I mean, what happens if there's a disruption in terms of the price and the price of aluminum cans? Does that get passed on to the consumer? Does that eat into your profits? What happens to the business?
As a small brewery, we're price takers in terms of what the overall price for beer is in the market based on taxes and inputs. I think the big players like Molson and Coors and Labatt have a lot more market power in terms of how they probably avoid that, but they'll probably be impacted as well. They also have the ability to do intra-firm pricing, so I don't know what kind of tools they have in their toolbox to be able to manage that. But certainly as a small brewery, we try to get the best price we can, but we essentially are price takers. We don't have the market share to shape price from our suppliers. We order cans on such a large scale just to get those down to a price that we can sell en masse at over 1 million cans a year. But in a couple months, we're going to have a warehouse at Centerport, which will allow us to do a lot of that in-house. So we will have a little bit of extra capacity to store cans, a little bit more control, but any savings you're going to get by stockpiling cans, you're going to end up paying for in storage fees. If you look behind us, there's a lot of stainless steel and aluminum. And fortunately, we've purchased a lot of this already. We've invested in our capital equipment. But if we were to continue to invest and want to grow our business, that would be really difficult if the capital equipment was being hit with a 25% tariff. That would almost be impossible to be importing some of these pieces of equipment. Around the growth of the business, we started with just 2 tanks. We've kind of bootstrapped it. We kind of grew and bought more equipment. And so we still have plans this year to continue to grow, and those will be put on hold for sure. We are also looking at expanding into maybe Minnesota and Wisconsin. That's definitely on hold for now. So we want to look at growing our business across Canada if possible.
Anything that you would like to see happen when it comes to provincial or federal governments if these tariffs do come into place next month?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things. I mean, one, we have to strengthen Canada. This is a huge opportunity to take down interprovincial trade barriers and to look at strengthening supply chains within Canada and what can be done around that. For instance, we sell a lot of beer here in Manitoba, and all of our customers go to the cottage country in Kenora, and many of them take our beer across to Kenora, to the Lake Country, and I'm really grateful for that. But we can't sell our beer easily and readily in Ontario. So I'd like to see that change so we can start expanding our market here.
What about bottles? Are they an option?
The craft brewing industry moved away from bottles a long time ago, and so has the domestic producers as well. The bottles are heavy, they require a huge space to clean and run the bottling line, they break, it's just an inferior product. But also aluminum is an incredible metal, like 99.99% of it can be fully recycled, melted down, formed into another can or another piece of metal. It doesn't lose any of its properties. So I think everybody's kind of moved to aluminum. It would take a huge adjustment to go back to bottles for anyone.
That was the CBC's Alana Cole speaking with Kevin Silch of Little Brown Jug Brewing Company.
1942, Europe. Soldiers find a boy surviving alone in the woods. They make him a member of Hitler's army. But what no one would know for decades, he was Jewish. Could a story so unbelievable be true? I'm Dan Goldberg, and from CBC's Personally, Toy Soldier.
Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
At 7:56, let's get the very latest from our Winnipeg newsroom with Megan Ketchison.
Well, good morning. U.S. President Donald Trump still plans to impose tariffs on Canadian goods next week. He reiterated 25% tariffs will go into effect on March the 4th. Meanwhile, Winnipeg South Centre MP Ben Carr is in Washington, still trying to use diplomacy to stave them off. And we'll hear from the lawyer for a retired farmer from McGregor who is suing the RCMP after an officer allegedly forced his way into his home and used a stun gun on him. He says his charter rights were violated and wants damages and restitution. And I'll have more at 8:30.
All right. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Traffic-wise this morning, we're not hearing of any major problems. But when the temperatures are close to zero, it can get slippery. So watch for some slippery stretches along some of our streets or even on the sidewalks. We are sitting at -3 right now in Winnipeg, on our way to a glorious high of 4 degrees, if you like that kind of thing. Tomorrow staying relatively mild as well, a mix of sun and cloud, and a high of 3 degrees. Still to come here on Information Radio, for a Winnipeg group, the fight to prevent arson in the city's North End is also a fight to preserve our city's history. We'll learn more about that coming up after 8 o'clock. I'm Margo Watt, in for Marcy Marcusa today. This is Information Radio on 89.3 FM and on YouTube. Great to have you with us. World Report is next.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Canadian actor Enrico Colantoni dreamed of moving to the U.S. and making a name in Hollywood. It wasn't an easy road, but eventually he was able to do just that. He'll tell you about his path from his early struggles in New York to his role on the new show, Allegiance.
This job has one rule. You follow orders.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Loving your kids is inevitable, expectant parents are told, but some mothers and fathers are admitting on social media that there is regret mixed in with that affection. Why some parents are coming clean about these feelings they've been hiding, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The first major French test is over for the Liberal leadership hopefuls and their scores. Let's just say some of the candidates are probably glad they're being graded on a curve. All four of the remaining contenders square off again tonight, this time in English. But first, let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, were there any fireworks last night?
Marcia, no. There were some nuances in a few policy areas, but if the point of this debate was to set up a united front against Donald Trump in the first round on Canada-U.S. relations and then against Pierre Poilievre in the subsequent rounds on the economy and climate action, well, mission accomplished because the candidates spent more time criticizing those two as their real opponents than each other. In the post-debate scrums, Chrystia Freeland was spinning this as a positive.
This is a race inside the family, inside our party. And it's a really good thing that we are agreed about very many things.
Tonight's English debate will feature the same themes as the first French debate. We will see if there are the same friendly tones or whether things get more aggressive the second time out discussing their differences. Because without big policy disagreements to explore last night, minds focused instead on how well each candidate was communicating in French. And Carney in particular seemed to be shifting a bit uncomfortably as he thought on his feet.
Tell us more about that, Janice.
Before the debate was even over, Conservatives pounced on one moment in particular, when Carney intended to say he agreed with the point Frank Baylis had made about Hamas, but it came out as Carney saying, "We agree with Hamas." Freeland, standing beside him, had to jump in and clarify what he meant so the error didn't stand. Here's how Carney and Baylis summed it up for reporters.
I said that we all were in agreement against Hamas, or at least the intention.
If we all get tripped up in different second language or third languages and that, I'm absolutely certain Mr. Carney did not mean to say he supported Hamas in any way and that he's completely against Hamas.
At several points in the debate, rather than leave him to suffer for his miscommunication, Chrystia Freeland intervened to help Carney get his message out. Now, that's very helpful behavior for a loyal lieutenant, but it's going to be interesting to see what Liberal supporters make of these two rivals looking so chummy. Their debate ended with a hug, not a handshake.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa.
When I meet President Trump, I will be clear. I want this relationship to go from strength to strength.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer addressing Parliament ahead of tomorrow's meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. They will be discussing defense and the ongoing war in Ukraine. Today, Starmer committed to spending 2.5% of GDP on defense by 2027. The White House continues to push NATO allies to spend more. Yesterday, French President Emmanuel Macron sat down with Donald Trump to discuss Ukraine. Macron warns that any peace deal with Russian President Vladimir Putin must come with guarantees. The CBC's Crystal Romancing has more.
We want peace. And I think the initiative of President Trump is a very positive one.
Praise for the president on Fox News Channel's special report with Brett Bayer, a direct pipeline for French President Emmanuel Macron to a majority of U.S. President Donald Trump's supporters.
We worked very hard together with the UK Prime Minister to say we are ready to send troops, not to go to the front line, but to be as a presence to maintain this peace.
The interview followed friendly meetings with the president.
President Macron is very special
man in my book.
The most powerful nation in the world has adopted a more neutral stance in relation to the war in Ukraine, no longer saying Russia is the aggressor. Macron used the face-to-face time to tell Trump Russia can't be trusted and said that any peace must not mean the surrender of Ukraine. Eleanor Carreau is the vice president for the French Foreign Affairs Committee.
For Donald Trump, this is the opportunity to make a good deal. For Emmanuel Macron, who's speaking on behalf of France, but also to a certain extent on behalf of Europeans, this is an existential conflict.
Different motivations, but both want the war to end. That mutual starting point will be picked up by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who's next in line to visit the president. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
The International Criminal Court has sent its prosecutor to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Armed rebels continue to capture territory in the country's eastern region. Today, ICC prosecutor Karim Khan issued this warning.
Hundreds of people are reportedly dead, thousands injured. And the message has to be conveyed very clearly. Any armed group, any armed forces, any allies of armed groups or armed forces don't have a blank check. They must comply with international humanitarian law.
Congo's prime minister says more than 7,000 people have died since M23 rebels took over the provincial capital of Goma last month. The region has been at the center of brutal battles for decades. Armed groups are fighting for control of the mineral-rich territory. There is some positive news from the Vatican this morning. Pope Francis is showing some improvement after another night in hospital. A steady stream of people have been flowing through St. Peter's Square to offer their support for the 88-year-old.
I think it's a severe situation, so we have to pray for him. It will be very difficult for him, I think.
I'm worried for the person, but not from a religious point of view. He's still an important person for many people.
The Pope has been in hospital for 11 days. He has bronchitis and pneumonia, and he has shown signs of kidney failure, but the Vatican says that is now under control. The threat of U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs is already affecting Canada's construction industry. It is driving up the costs of bigger residential projects, and experts warn it could make the housing crisis even worse. Lauren Bird reports.
Steel I-beams make up the structure of almost every high-rise. Canada doesn't manufacture a lot of them. Most are imported. Keenan Loomis is the president and CEO of the Canadian Institute of Steel Construction.
But it will be subject to retaliatory tariffs if the government of Canada decides that that's a product that they are going to impact with tariffs.
Steel is on a long list of items the Canadian government says it will tariff in response to Donald Trump's tariff threats. Much of that list are things required for building homes and high-rises: flooring, shingles, windows, lumber. When those costs go up for builders, eventually it goes up for the buyer. Scott Anderson is the head of the Ontario Home Builders Association.
Anything that is in high demand going into home construction, cement, rebar, things like that, if there are tariffs that are hitting those, it's just going to continue to drive the costs up.
But some builders may decide the added cost is too much to make a project viable. Michael Brooks is the head of the Real Property Association of Canada, which represents the real estate investment and development sector.
I've already heard about projects for new housing, new apartments being shelved just because of the uncertainty.
And for a country already in a housing crisis, experts say anything that makes housing more expensive or harder to build will likely lead to supply issues down the road. Lauren Bird, CBC News, Toronto.
Canadian pride has been on the rise ever since Donald Trump mused about his desire for the country to be the 51st state. So it's no surprise some Canadians raised alarms over Google Maps labeling. Google has followed Trump's lead. For U.S. users, the Gulf of Mexico is now the Gulf of America. And as Liam Britton tells us, some parks in this country have been changed too.
So I thought, well, how can this possibly be true?
That's what Kiki Grabowski thought when she read a post on social media saying that Google Maps had started labeling provincial parks, like Elk Falls near her Campbell River, BC home, as state parks.
Well, that's our sovereignty. That's our country. Those parks belong to Canada. They are not state parks.
On Google's help forum and social media, thousands of users noted the errors affecting parks across the country. But Google told CBC, quote, The vast majority of these parks have had their existing labels for several years. We're actively working to update labels for parks in Canada to avoid confusion. The concerns come at a time of tension between Canada and the U.S., but University of Victoria professor Ruben Rose Redwood also points out the maps are absolutely using the wrong terms.
I do think that Canadians are right to criticize these maps and to say, hey, these are not state parks, these are provincial parks, and they should be labeled as such.
As Monday turned to Tuesday, a number of formerly incorrect state parks had been reclassified as provincial parks or just plain old parks. Perhaps a sign of Google charting a new course. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, and on YouTube. I'm Margo Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Coming up on the program, how some Winnipeggers are coming together to fight arson in the city's North End, and they're also launching a fight to preserve our city's history. That story still to come. A complete look at your Manitoba forecast. How long will this mild weather last? We'll ask Abby about that. The latest on the drive-in this morning, as we have somewhat slippery conditions, but so far no major problems heading to work this morning. You're with Information Radio, 89.3 FM, and on YouTube. It is 11 minutes after 8, minus 3 degrees here in Winnipeg, with the very latest from our CBC Winnipeg newsroom. Here's Megan Ketchison.
Well, Manitoba is warning a late uptick in flu cases is putting a strain on the healthcare system. Cases of influenza A strain are trending upward in the province, and this comes as Canada deals with what may be the highest number of flu cases seen since the pandemic. And President Donald Trump says the tariffs are going ahead next week, and the founder of Little Brown Jug Brewing in Winnipeg's Exchange District is wondering how the tariffs will affect him. The aluminum cans he uses comes from the U.S. He says it's still unclear what the impact of those tariffs will be on costs and pricing. And we'll have more at 8:30.
All right. Thanks very much, Megan.
Thank you.
And with the very latest on the forecast across Manitoba from border to border, here's Abby.
Yeah, let's look at the condition across the province. We're seeing another warm day. Expect mainly cloudy conditions with sunny breaks in the afternoon. Though northern Manitoba will be closer to seasonal with light snow in some places this morning. Right now, Winnipeg, we are still at -3. And if you look outside, look up, the sun is up. It's a sunny start. We see a transition to a mix of sun and clouds later this morning. It gets breezy at some point from the south. We warm up to a high of 4 degrees. Tonight we'll see partly cloudy conditions, and that will take us into the overnight period. And this stretch continues tomorrow as we get a mix of sun and clouds tomorrow. So in summary, it's going to be more like a bright and mainly sunny one across the province with some cloud cover moving in later. And you said you want to know what's coming down the line, or should I just hold that for now?
Information's good.
We're tracking an Alberta Clipper.
Yeah, that would happen. It's almost March, so there we go.
I'm just going to put that, punch it in. An Alberta Clipper coming to this part of the province very soon.
Okay, well, we'll get to that later. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
With the latest on the commute, here's Corey.
Yeah, a couple things to keep an eye out for. Eastbound Abinogi-Mikina approaching Fort Garry Bridge. There's a stall blocking the eastbound curb lane, so keep left to get around that. Also heard about potholes starting to form because it is the season on around Meadowood and St. Mary's. Paul got a kick calls on the commuter line to let us know about that. They're small for now, and the city's already tried to fill a few, but they're kind of starting to pop up, so careful there. If you have any other updates for me, if you're walking, biking, driving, let me know what you're seeing out there and let folks know. 204-788-3093.
There's been growing concern about the high number of fires in the north end of Winnipeg, many of the fires in vacant buildings, and some even historic, like the Sutherland Hotel, which burned down earlier this year. For a group of Winnipeggers, arson prevention goes beyond stopping fires. Tonight, a group called North End History will be hosting its monthly general meeting, and at the top of the agenda is arson prevention. Michael Redhead Champagne is one of the organizers and a longtime community activist, and he says the fight to stop the fires is also a fight to preserve our city's history. It's a pleasure to have Michael with us this morning. Good morning.
Thanks so much for having me and for having this important conversation.
Nice of you to be here. How bad would you say the arson situation is in the North End right now?
I mean, it's pretty rough. We're having a rough time right now in the North End of Winnipeg. We are regularly dealing with older buildings that are going up in flames, and it's just feels constant. And it's happening on our bigger streets as well, so Selkirk Avenue, Main Street. And when we see these things happening, it really impacts the whole neighborhood, not only because there's a missing building and there has been arson, but because folks maybe have been hurt in that situation, and building owners are now reeling, and the community has one less service.
So it really touches everyone.
It does. It really does. And especially in situations that we've seen recently, like you mentioned the Sutherland, we have historic building stock in Winnipeg and historic buildings that contain stories. North End History wants to celebrate people, places, artifacts, and stories of North Enders. And in Winnipeg and in the North End, we have a North End spirit. And that North End spirit means we stand up and we work together to try our best to confront the challenges that we're facing, even when they seem impossible.
And how challenging is that when some of those holders of the stories are disappearing?
It's very, very challenging. And that's part of why the North End History Group is really working to include younger people in the story so that we can do some of that relationship building and hearing of stories of the older generations, that they can be preserved in a good way. But that's partially why we want to do this arson prevention. So many stories are contained within our built environment, and there are so many iconic buildings that we have in the North End of Winnipeg. When we shift maybe from a perspective of what those historic buildings could be, we look in the Exchange District and we see very, very great opportunities for economic development when it comes to filming sets and locations. And I feel like the North End of Winnipeg has just the right amount of older building stock that we could also serve as a movie location if only we were able to, zhuzh up our buildings and make those historic buildings a little bit nicer and shinier. We might be able to also be a place where we have those economic development opportunities where we could create movies and, like we started with, tell stories.
Do you have a sense that you've been overlooked somewhat in that regard when you talk about the Exchange and what they've done there and what you see as potential in the North End?
Well, I think the North End tends to stand up and speak out when we feel like we need to. And, sometimes that's because we feel overlooked, and sometimes it feels like because we got a problem that we're working on. And so I think in this situation, it's us identifying that the residents of the neighborhood and the businesses and the organizations are really passionate about making sure we have a safe community and we take good care of it. But we're afraid right now with all of these fires that are happening that some of that is at risk. And so really what we're hoping to do tonight at the North End History General Meeting, which is at 6 o'clock at Merchants Corner, which is, again, a historic building that has been new life has been breathed into it on Selkirk Avenue. Inside of that building, we'll be talking about arson prevention, and we'll be identifying some of those problem areas, and then identifying who are some of the helpers and the main people that we need to bring together to address this challenge. And then the third thing we're going to do is actually bring those folks together so we can make a plan and measure it, because there's no point in just having pretty words. We actually have to have a plan and then over time measure our progress and make necessary adjustments as possible. So we don't have a plan yet, but we are going to make a real good one. I trust the North End.
And it sounds like this is an issue that we've certainly heard about for years, I think, right? But now it's gotten to the point where you really feel serious action needs to be taken.
We do, and there are many organizations in the neighborhood like William White Neighborhoods Association, North End Community Renewal Corporation, and others that are doing fantastic work in arson prevention. So we feel like if we can put all of those folks together, we can make a better plan and we can actually improve the situation if we do it together.
What are you hearing from people in the neighborhood about the current state?
I think a lot of folks are worried. People are really, really concerned. And not only are they worried about the arson and the damage that it has on the building and our overall historical culture as a neighborhood, folks are worried about the people that are seeking shelter inside of those empty buildings. And they're worried about people struggling with homelessness. And they're worried about our relatives that are out there sleeping on the street. And so North Enders aren't just wanting to displace folks that are having a hard time, that are inside of some of these buildings that burn down. We want to have a comprehensive solution that takes care of our relatives that are struggling with homelessness or mental health challenges that maybe are a part of these fires in some kind of way, but also engage those building owners and organizations so that we can make the building safe and provide whatever supports and services we need for those folks that are struggling, as well as the business owners and building owners to breathe new life into these buildings so that we can celebrate the history and the people and the stories of Winnipeg's North End.
How much help do you think you need, Michael, from governments, from outside agencies?
I think we need so much help. Part of why I'm here today is because anybody listening who thinks that they're in a position to help us, we are casting a wide net. We don't know what the answer is, but we know what the question is. The question is, how can we prevent arson in the North End of Winnipeg? And if you feel like you have a piece of the answer, we need your help tonight at 6 o'clock at Merchants Corner Inc. with North End History.
Why do you think the problem's so bad now?
That's a great question. And I think that's another one of the topics we're going to broach this evening. We're going to chat with folks and ask that very question about what do they see as the reasons behind some of these fires? What do they see as some of the possible sources of these consistent fires? And if we can identify some of those sources, that's obviously where we want to then focus our energy in trying to prevent these things from happening too.
Great talking with you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Michael Redhead Champagne is an organizer with North End History. The group will be hosting their monthly general meeting today, as Michael mentioned, 6 p.m. at Merchants Corner. And you can also find out more information about the group and what they're doing on Instagram, and that's at North End History.
Have you visited CBC's Being Black in Canada website? It's an online platform to explore the stories and experiences of Black Canadians across the country. A space for news, documentaries, arts and culture, Black achievement in sports, and so much more. Celebrating a uniquely Canadian perspective on Black issues with the cultural moments that matter to Black Canadians. Visit cbc.ca/Being Black in Canada.
It is 8:21. You're with Information Radio here on the CBC. I'm Margot Watt. Great to have you here this morning. Daniel Monkman and Adam Sturgeon are on the minds behind the Anishinaabe Canadian band Ombikaze. They recently shared their sophomore album, marking a move away from the positive energy presented by their debut release. This time, they're drawing on feelings of shame and sadness as a reminder that it's okay just to feel. Let's hear a song from the new album. This is Laminate the Sky.
Smothered by the dream, moon
There's a powerful song. Love that. Ombigaze from Laminate the Sky. The new album is called Shame and is out right now. I don't know if you've heard about the 3-day dating rule, perhaps the 3-month or the 6-month dating rule. These are some of the many pieces of dating advice trending on social media right now. But is online advice helping or hurting our relationships? Carlin Costa is a psychotherapist and clinical sexologist. She explains some of the buzzier concepts trending online.
The 3-day dating rule is, about giving people an opportunity to kind of get to know each other before actually committing. Many people will kind of do, going on a few dates and then connecting before committing, getting to know one another, and really just like kind of taking a step back from just jumping into, I like you, let's do this. Let me actually get to know you and make sure that we're compatible first. So when it comes to dating, we're hearing all kinds of different buzzwords. So we're hearing things about like attachment theory. We're hearing things like red flags. We're hearing words like everybody is a narcissist these days. It really kind of oscillates between some really positive things like relationship goals that can sometimes be positive, but also really building community around what are red flags or like no-goes for being able to attach yourself to somebody and connect with somebody to make sure that, you're on the same level of emotional intelligence. Social media, I think, has completely shifted the way we actually approach dating and relationships. On one hand, it's given us access to conversations about attachment styles, boundaries, and communication that previous generations, I don't think, really had. But on the other hand, it's also created a culture where relationship advice is often reduced to like quick viral sound bites, that don't always account for nuance or context. Those generalizations aren't really very helpful. That is why I think, if you're going to use social media to assess your dating life, it is actually really helpful to then maybe see a therapist to assess like, okay, where am I at in my dating? How can I get clear about what my wants and needs are versus, just listening to these influencers who I'm sure are, very well-meaning with some of their information, but it doesn't capture the full picture of your capacity and your mental health.
Carlin Costa is a psychotherapist and clinical psychologist.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want. On Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1. Local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
It is 8:29. We are just ahead of an update from the CBC Winnipeg newsroom. A traffic note for you right now, and this is on the Abeno-Jimikana Bridge, approaching the Fort Garry Bridge, rather. We have a stall blocking the eastbound curb lane, so you'll want to keep left to pass there. -3 degrees here in Winnipeg with a mix of sun and clouds throughout today and a high of 4 degrees. Continuing mild for tomorrow, partly sunny conditions, and a high of +3. Still to come on The Current, regretful parents who feel they didn't understand all that parenting entails. They're sharing their stories on social media, wanting other parents to hear about the hard parts of having kids. 2 parents will be sharing their experiences on The Current, and that's coming up this morning at 8:37. Right now, it is time for CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg at 8:30. It's mainly clear and -3, sunny with a mix of sun and clouds later on and a high of 4. Manitoba is warning there is a late uptick in flu cases and it's putting a strain on the healthcare system. Manitoba cases of influenza A strain are trending upwards, and that comes as Canada deals with what may be the highest number of flu cases seen since the pandemic. Dr. Craig Jenny is an infectious disease expert at the University of Calgary.
This is also, in many parts of Canada, coupled to a near record low vaccine rate. vaccine rates continue to drop, and because of that, we do see a lot more flu cases, and we see a lot of people, unfortunately, needing medical care in the hospitals.
Manitoba's flu shot coverage rate fell 2% from last year to 23%. The province's top doctor is encouraging people who haven't gotten the shot yet to do so. Those in Canada's home construction industry are watching with concern as the Trump administration tariff threats approach. In fact, certain projects are already being affected before any trade action kicks off. Lauren Bird explains.
Steel is on a long list of items the Canadian government says it will tariff in response to Donald Trump's tariff threats. Much of that list are things required for building homes and high-rises: flooring, shingles, windows, lumber. When those costs go up for builders, eventually it goes up for the buyer. Scott Anderson is the head of the Ontario Home Builders Association.
Anything that is in high demand going into home construction, cement, rebar, things like that, if there are tariffs that are hitting those, it's just going to continue to drive the costs up.
But some builders may decide the added cost is too much to make a project viable. Michael Brooks is the head of the Real Property Association of Canada, which represents the real estate investment and development sector.
I've already heard about projects for new housing, new apartments being shelved just because of the uncertainty.
And for a country already in a housing crisis, experts say anything that makes housing more expensive or harder to build will likely lead to supply issues down the road. Lauren Bird, CBC News, Toronto.
And U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to impose the 25% tariff on steel and aluminum has also some local Manitoba brewers watching closely.
We're doing about 80 cans a minute.
At Little Brown Jug Brewing in Winnipeg's Exchange District, the beer is made here, but the aluminum cans come from the U.S. LBJ founder Kevin Selch says the threat of tariffs is creating uncertainty when it comes to expanding costs and pricing.
The impact of a 25% tariff for us is probably about 5 or 6 cents on per can of the tallboy can, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in manufacturing, margins are really, really tight, and so we're always fighting to make the price 5 cents cheaper or to save 5 cents.
Meanwhile, Canadian politicians are still trying to use diplomacy to stave those tariffs off. Winnipeg South MP Ben Carr is part of another delegation in Washington, D.C. Carr says talking to U.S. officials is important, no matter what Trump does.
The best decisions for us to be making right now, in light of what he has put on the table, is to meet with our counterparts, advocate not only for Canada, but to advocate for why the relationship that we have with the Americans is mutually beneficial.
Carr says if tariffs are imposed next week, the diplomatic focus will switch to removing them. A retired farmer from McGregor is suing RCMP after an officer allegedly forced his way into his home and used a stun gun on him. In February of 2023, RCMP were called to Leonard Braun's home after receiving a call to keep the peace by a friend of Braun's former spouse who was helping her move out as a result of a separation. That's according to a lawsuit filed in the Court of King's Bench last week. Braun is seeking charter damages in addition to other restitution. He was arrested for assaulting the officer, but the charge was stayed after the Mountie testified midway through his trial. Lawyer Carl Gorenluck filed the lawsuit in Manitoba Court of King's Bench last week.
In our view, the officer's actions represented really a blatant disregard for Mr. Braun's charter rights to be free from that kind of action by police. Our feeling is that this is a way to get accountability for the actions of the RCMP.
The RCMP say they're not in a position to comment on an ongoing civil matter. And that's the CBC News from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you.
And let's take one more look at traffic with Corey before we go.
Yeah, eastbound Abinogi-Mikina approaching the Fort Garry Bridge. There's a stall blocking that curb lane there, the eastbound curb lane, so keep left to get around that. Otherwise, a few potholes starting to show up at St. Mary's in Meadowood or so. Heard from a caller, but there may be more. So you can always call in tomorrow to let me know what you're seeing out there.
All right. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
And Abby?
We're looking at
nice
a mix of sun and clouds across the province today. It's going to be mild down south. The snow is actually hanging back in the northern parts of the province. Winnipeg, we're starting sunny before the clouds will be rolling in later. We get to a high of 4 degrees. And then similar conditions were seen in the Pembina Valley region. Down in Dauphin and the Interlake region, we're going to see them warm up to high of +4. So down south, we're going to see most of the regions warm up to almost 5 degrees. That's what I see for Morden and Winkler, close to the U.S. border this morning.
All right. Thanks very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Very nice spending time with these gentlemen and all of you this morning on Information Radio. Abby Adiyamik is our technical producer, covers the weather for us. Corey Funk is our show director, covering the commute as well. Our YouTube producer is Kevin Nipatebo. Also, thanks to the other folks behind the scenes here, Chidi Akuma, Jim Agapito, Shanali Vidal, Alana Cole, and I'm Margot Watt. It's been great being here. I'm in for Marcy Marcusa. The Current is next.